Good. Okay. It's working. Test one, two, three.
Hi there, folks. So normally Tom would just start right into the podcast if you're watching the video version of this, but Lee and I are trying to figure out the wonderfulness of YouTube and technical hangups. So if you're watching the video version of this, welcome to behind the scenes of AV Rant
Sure.
before we actually start the podcast. And
I'll start talking about some family photos while you figure it out. And we'll look at some. This is stuff from the late 60s, early 70s.
Okay.
Here's my first haircut right down here where I'm in the chair, and it's really cute.
Okay, you know what? The links work. I was hearing myself doubly, so okay. I think we're okay. I'm gonna act as though we are, and that's how life is gonna proceed from here on out.
Hope for the best. I'm still recording. Audio is being captured. You're
All
there.
right. If you see this video and then you go and listen to the audio only version, all of this will be edited out.
You're getting a behind the scenes.
It'll be like magic.
It's also slick and professional.
Okay, Lee, we're gonna go a couple seconds of silence and then we'll start in.
Okay.
Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. My name is Rob H, and this week I am here with
Lee Overstreet, the pinch hitter occasionally for AV
Indeed.
Rant.
Once again, very kindly coming in on very short notice. Tom is deathly ill. Tom Andry, the associate editor of Audioholics, is normally the host of this program. He is in bed with a very high fever, and we're wishing him well, hoping him a speedy recovery. And so, as I say, Lee very graciously agreed to step in last moment. I was trying to get our producer, Austin, to join us. He is away at a concert. Lucky guy.
Oh,
I mean,
that sounds fun. Do we know
knows-
what concert?
I think he said AC/DC.
What?
I believe
Wow.
that's what he said. Yeah, I imagine going and listening to live music. I mean, what's that about?
Yeah, like instruments that play sound through the air into microphones. What is
through
that?
Not through speakers at home and a projection screen. It's unheard of to actually go and see live performers. No, he's doing what we should all do from time to time and actually going and seeing a live performance. I also reached out to Ray Coronado, but he's unable to join us. So we are not even 3/4 of a Tom this week.
No, I never even claimed to be maybe like Tom's left eye. I could do. That's
There
what
you
I got.
go.
I'm master of the last minute make it up and kind of sound like I know what I'm talking about. So I'm here for color commentary and to help Rob suss out all these answers.
It is a huge help. I'm so thankful that you're here, and thanks to our producer Austin, who has put together our topic list. He fields all the questions, and that's what this show is. This is AV Rant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. We take your questions, we take your feedback, we respond to them every week. We get to every single email that gets sent to us that is actually requesting that we talk about it on the podcast.
No matter what it does to our schedules and lives,
That's right.
we answer every question.
It might take us a while to get there, and you might even donate to the podcast, as some people did this week, and not have your question answered that week because we simply go in chronological order, in the order in which we receive them, but we do get to every question.
Donations are separate from answers. One doesn't buy the other.
That seems to be the case, yes. Speaking of which, we do have listeners of the week. We want to thank Jason, and we want to thank Chris. I don't live in a McMansion. They both sent in donations, and Chris actually very kindly helped out a different Jason from last week. Not the Jason I just mentioned who donated, but a different Jason who was asking about whether a Onkyo 818 would be able to power some M and K speakers, and Chris had both of those items, and he's like, worked fine for him. He powered 7 of them. Jason only has 5, so he's saying, don't worry about it. The Onkyo can handle those M and K speakers, so that's good to know from someone who actually did it firsthand.
There you go.
We also have Daniel. He sent us a donation as well. Thank you so much. And he also did another thing that can make you a listener of the week, which is he let SVS know that he bought a PB1000 subwoofer because of AV Rant.
I wonder if anybody at SVS is noticing the pattern.
We know they know about us. That is most definitely sure. Scott S. also put in quite a large order with SVS, some Prime speakers and a PC 2000 subwoofer to complement the PB 2000 that he already had. So he's getting a cylinder to complement a ported box. He let SVS know that he went with them because of AV Rant. And over on Twitter, one of the followers there, Coffee Man Dave, good handle,
I love coffee, so I respect that Twitter handle.
He recommended to Robert Heron and some of the folks who were asking Robert Heron some questions that they come and listen to AV Rant because they were asking subwoofer questions, and it's almost as though AV Rant and subwoofers go like a hand in a glove and go together.
Yes.
Peanut butter
Which
jelly.
makes it really strange that I'm on this podcast so often because guess what I don't have? A subwoofer.
Separate subwoofer.
And it drives Tom crazy, and I hope we get to some questions and issues I'm having later because
we definitely will.
It all ties together, and I'm having issues, and it's driving me nuts.
So this is the podcast where we answer your home theater and AV questions, and to get your questions answered, all you have to do is email us. Now, you can email us separately. You can email me, Rob, at avrant.com, if all you want to do is talk to me for some weird reason. You can email Tom, our normal host, Tom at avrant.com. You can email him just by himself if you want to, badmouth me behind the scenes and never have me see it.
No, that makes no sense. Let's be honest. We all know you're the good guy. Come on,
is that how it works?
We all know you're the nice one.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Tom's not here. I can say that.
Smooth and edgy, and I'm smooth apparently. And so, if you want to
be edgy and grumpy,
if you want to make sure that your question is on the podcast, you want to email question@avrant.com. And yes, we did reserve questions in the plural at avrant.com as well, in case you didn't catch that there's no S on the end of that. Those actually go to Austin, our producer. He makes sure they get added to the list. And so if you want to make sure all three of us see it at once, please CC all of us. Tom at avrant.com, Rob at avrant.com, question at avrant.com. It will reach all of us. We do have a website, avrant.com. And when we talk about links and videos and things like that on the podcast, that's where all of those show up. You want to go to avrant.com to see all the links. And if you would like to donate to the podcast, that's where you go, avrant.com. Over on the right-hand side, there is a support the podcast link. It is a little cup of coffee that Tom is very proud of the graphic that he made all by himself.
It is a good graphic. Nice. I've said before, that's a good graphic. And if anybody wants to contact me, at Lee Overtweet on Twitter.
You go.
At Lee Overtweet, not street, at Lee Overtweet. And what's funny to me is I've had some people follow me that I can tell heard my handle via this podcast, and they never say anything. And I wonder what they're thinking of me, because most of my tweets are just, brain blurts about anything, whatever's on my mind as I'm walking around with my phone. I just can't imagine. They're probably thinking, what does this guy have to do with anything? Why am I following? But if you want to hear from me and you want to contact me,
it's easy to follow people on Twitter. You can follow us too. I am at First Reflect. FIRSTREFLECT. Tom is at AVRant_Tom, because he loves those special characters. And our producer, Austin, is at
Lame.
Austin Pond. No, not at Lame. At Austin Pond is our producer.
No, I was saying lame to Tom's underscore, yes.
Yeah.
And Austin is spelled with an E, Austin.
With an E. That is absolutely right. Finally, to contact us, you can reach out to us on Facebook. That is facebook.com/AVRantPodcast, all in one word, and we do respond over there from time to time. So, with all of that contact information out of the way, why don't we jump into some news, Lee? How does that sound?
I love news, Tom. Rob, not Tom, Rob.
How many times have you even recorded with Tom without me being there?
Actually, I think just one time. I think just one time. And that one time, he made fun of my hair.
Uh-huh.
So that's just a thing. Remember. I'm telling you, you're the nice guy.
Well, care of one of our listeners, James B., and this news was blasted out to everyone who has ever followed SVS in any capacity. They are moving. They're moving their headquarters. They're clearing out their current warehouse. And as a result, they're selling off quite a lot of products through their outlet store. So you'll definitely want to check out their outlet specials. There's specials on subwoofers, on speakers, lots of stuff. So,
I did take a quick look, and I wish I had like $900 to get a couple of
just lying around.
What is it? The sealed ones, the SB 1000s, I think, are on sale.
Yeah, that's some nice stuff. So, check that out. And what was happening over in Europe last week? There was the IFA Expo, which is sort of you can think of it like the European version of CES. It's a big electronics expo, and Panasonic made some news there because they announced their first 65-inch 4K resolution, high dynamic range OLED display.
Wow.
It is their CZ950 model. Pricing has not been announced yet, but this is the first large format OLED from Panasonic. Everybody suspects it's actually an LG panel. because there were talks behind the scenes, known talks between Panasonic and LG for them to license the technology from LG and then make their own software to do those types of things.
Well, there are only so many factories. Right.
Well, yeah, I mean, LG is almost the only game in town for large format OLED screens, so that seems very likely. Also, it's curved.
Yeah, that stopped me dead in my tracks. I was so excited. I love Panasonic. I have a Panasonic Plasma. This sounds so exciting. 4K, OLED, curved.
Uh-huh. And I suspect that's an LG. That's there, but at least there's one other player in the OLED market now, even if the actual panels themselves are still the same player we're used to. And lastly, in the news, this was out of IFA as well, Samsung, as we would expect, they are the first to officially announce an Ultra HD Blu-ray player. So this will be their UBD, which I'm assuming stands for Ultra HD Blu-ray disc.
Does that mean all Blu-ray players are going to be UBD? Because all Blu-ray players are BD, right?
BD, yeah. It would not surprise me in the least. Or UB, maybe, Ultra HD Blu-ray. But yeah, UBD K8500. And now they're saying it's going to launch in early 2016. So that whole hope we had that they might be out before Christmas, maybe not going to happen.
There's got to be content, too. How many discs are there right now? There are 0, right?
Well, 0 discs right now, and Fox is the only studio that has officially said, yes, we will have content available day one. Right. Now, we did get a little bit of pricing info, which is kind of cool. Samsung saying the player should come out for under $500. I'm guessing that means $499. And
yes, $499.99.
Yes, and Fox has said the discs themselves should cost about $30. So... Right. These are not the same as the high prices we saw when Blu-ray first launched. Well, remember that the first Blu-ray player that came out was a Samsung, and it was $1,000, and the discs were like $40 to $45 when they first came
slow as Christmas when it first came out.
Yeah,
because
no kidding.
The computer inside it could barely do it. However, the only thing that makes me want to kill someone, the Blu-ray, the Ultra Blu-ray player here, this Samsung, it's also curved.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
it's curved. The player's curved. It's not it's just curved.
And it doesn't do anything. I mean,
no, there's no reason to curve it.
Really not.
If you needed any more proof that the curve thing is just a fancy trend to look cool, they curved the actual player.
Now they've got curved sound bars, and so it's kind of hinting that they aren't planning to move away from the curve. Not too
it's because it looks futuristic. It looks like the next thing. That's why they do it. That's why they do it. There's no advantage.
It's because they can.
Because they can. It looks neat when you first see it.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, enough of the news. That was pretty much it. Other than I have to say the Star Wars BB-8 toy is hilariously awesome. That little Sphero BB-8.
Oh, did you get that?
I haven't been able to. It was sold out by the time I knew it existed, so I got to wait for the next bunch of shipments to come. I can't resist that. Everyone was joking, like, what if BB-8 turns out to be the Jar Jar Binks of the new thing? Like, everybody already loves him and thinks he's a cool toy, and then what if he's a horrible character?
Oh, I hope not. I feel like probably they're going to avoid that problem with this movie.
I hope so.
I hope
goodness.
I'm right.
All right, well. Let's move on to what we actually do on this podcast, which is answer questions. We have lots left over from last week. So we're going to start with Byron S. the First, because we now have multiple Byron S's, not just Byrons, but actual Byron S's.
We should add up like the names and see what the most common name for an AV Rant listener is.
Yeah.
Jason, Byron, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Mike.
Yep. Yes, we have many Michaels. That is probably it. But yes, Byron's theater is open to his dining room. So he has 2 rooms right across from each other. There's a big opening at the back. It's not entirely open. There's kind of an archway at the back of his living room that opens entirely into his dining room. So he sent us a diagram to show what we're dealing with. And he has 2 subwoofers right now, 2 PC 2000s cylinders. And what he's done is he set them up kind of in diagonally opposite corners, but within his theater. Not within the entire open space. So
right, within his theater part of the space.
That's right, yeah. And so he was asking if it would be a good idea to actually take the subwoofer that right now is in his front right corner of his theater and move it to the back right corner of his theater leaving the second subwoofer, which is in the rear left corner of his theater, because again, he has this open dining room space behind the open archway. So when you look at the entire volume of air, having them in the two rear corners of the theater is actually more like the middle of the entire volume of space.
All right, so as you're listening, picture you're sitting in your home theater, and behind the couch a few feet is an open space, a giant open space to another room.
That's right. So my advice would be, yes, absolutely try doing that. I mean, look, nothing's holding your feet over a fire to keep it there. If it doesn't work out well, if you're happier with the way you had it before, by all means, move it back. Because, you know, when it comes to sound waves and fluid dynamics, the predictions don't always 100 match up with the reality of what you end up hearing or measuring, but absolutely give it a try, because according to all the math, this should be the optimal placement. This is essentially the midpoints of the two side walls by doing it this way, and that should work really well. So
now his the corners in the theater part of this large space are preserved. There's still corners there, and he has bass traps there, but he doesn't have bass traps in the big open area behind the couch.
That's right.
And so it's going to perform differently in those corners than it is in a bass trap corner, yes?
Slightly, but one thing I want to point out about passive bass traps, because that's what he has, they're like wedges that are in the corners, they're the tri-traps from Gick, is that the passive bass traps actually don't do a heck of a lot below about 80 hertz, which is pretty much where your big subwoofers are taking over. They're most effective in sort of like the 200 hertz region, and between like 100 and 500 hertz is where a bass trap really does its thing. So what it's doing is it's taking the resonance out of the room in sort of the crossover region and the lower registers of the speakers. And that's a good thing, because we want to remove that sort of boomy, bloated type of sound that comes from resonance within the room. And all they're doing is they're taking sound waves that normally would be bouncing around your room, and they're converting them into heat instead. But they don't have a tremendous effect on the really deep bass that the subwoofers are producing. So you can almost think of bass traps, passive bass traps, as not even really being there when it comes to the deep bass below 80 hertz, because they'd have to be like 5 or 6 feet thick in order to start having an impact, and they are definitely not that.
So basically just fill that entire room behind him.
Well, there you go. Yeah, that would be an effective passive bass trap for deep bass, but I don't know where he would eat.
Right,
but,
so I think the answer here is down to just try the different corners.
Yes. Yeah, but it's definitely worth a try.
Difficult to predict.
Yeah, for sure. Now, he's also experimented with his pair of subs because he wanted to get some more tactile feel. He wanted to get some more hit you in the chest, some more shake your teeth, blur your vision, flap the pant legs while you're sitting down type of bass. So he just kept turning his subwoofers up, and turning them up and turning them up. And eventually he got to where he got that tactile feel that he was after. Of course, it was like overblown at this point, and the bass was now considerably louder than the higher frequencies. He said it actually wasn't that bad. It was kind of surprising.
Yeah, I gotta be honest, it feels nice.
But he could definitely tell that the bass was boosted, so it wasn't quite ideal. If he was playing a bass sweep, there was no way it was sounding linear throughout. So after the shows, after our recording sessions, we have hangout parties where you can just come and chat casually with the hosts and fellow AV Rant listeners. And so he joined us like a couple months ago, and Ray Coronado, who I mentioned, who has reached out to see if he could join us this week, he has set up things. He has 4 subwoofers. This is Ray. He has one in each corner. But then he has a 5th subwoofer. And that 5th subwoofer he uses as a mid-bass module. It doesn't play all the way down to 20 hertz. It rolls off at about 50 hertz. And so it's really just taking that hit you in the chest type of bass. The 45 to sort of 65 hertz region. That's the stuff that really thumps you in the chest like the kick drum. Now he puts that right in the middle of his theater and just has it blasting out just that region of bass to give that extra tactile feel without using something like a butt kicker or a tactile transducer. So Byron's keen on this idea. He wouldn't mind trying it, but he wasn't quite sure how to set it all up.
Well, you know what I would want to do first, just for fun? I would take the 2 subs and sit them behind the 2 back corners of the couch, right behind my rear end. And it's kind of a symmetrical arrangement.
Yeah, see if that's enough.
And see if that, because if you're closer to it, you do feel it more.
That's true.
And there's your butt right next to it, or your chest, depending on the frequency, right? You're either getting the chest note or the brown note, but it'd be right behind you. And so, I don't know, I'd try that first.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just
Actually,
we're
the
moving
thing he
stuff
was going to
around.
try by having
Yeah.
the two subwoofers at the midpoints of his walls might actually be enough just to get there. But if it's not, and if you're someone else listening to this and that's not the setup you're going to have for your two subwoofers that are playing all the way down to 20 hertz, what you need is a crossover of some sort. You can still connect this mid-bass module just to the subwoofer output, just like you do with your other subs, but you want it to roll off somewhere in the 40 to 50 hertz region. You don't want it playing all the way down to 20 hertz. You want it to be a mid-bass module. So you have to add a filter to it. The easiest way to do that is just with the mini DSP. That's a $100 unit. Gives you 2 inputs and 4 outputs. You don't really need that in this case, but it allows you to do that many for $100. And you're going to want to set a pretty steep filter. So I would choose the 24 decibels per octave option. I would say create a high pass filter because we want the higher frequencies to go through and we want to filter out the lower frequencies.
Right.
So you create a high pass filter at 40 to 50 hertz, somewhere in that range, and you can experiment, trial and error, see what works best. And then about a 24 decibel per octave slope, and that should create for yourself a mid-bass module out of essentially any subwoofer that you like.
And then stick that right behind the couch.
And then stick that right behind the couch.
Yeah,
That's
sure.
right. That just became your butt kicker. Now, he
Sounds good.
is also considering expanding his speaker system. He was considering the front wide speakers, mainly because I've talked about them and said that I like them.
Look how you influence the world.
I know. I'm having an
That's
impact.
all you, man.
So he's a little bit concerned. First of all, he's not sure if his room is really large enough to make use of them. He's not sure if, front wide channels are really worth it all that much. I can tell you that any room, it's technically possible to put the front wide speakers in. It's an angle. It's not a position. So it's not that they have to be a number of feet outside of your front left and right speakers. It's that they have to create a 60-degree angle. So you go 60 degrees to your left, 60 degrees to your right, and that's where the front wide speakers are supposed to go. You'll also discover that that's, in almost all cases, if your room is set up symmetrically, exactly where your first reflections off of the side walls are coming from is 60 degrees to the left, 60 degrees to the right. And that's exactly what the front wide speakers are trying to do. They're trying to create controlled first reflections that are created by an algorithm and a digital signal processor rather than the actual acoustics of your room. I do kind of like them, but I can't really wholeheartedly recommend them to anyone else at this point. Not because I don't think front wide speakers are kind of cool and not because I don't like how they sound, because they just aren't being used. They just aren't being used.
Yeah, there's that problem.
Yeah. Dolby Atmos doesn't use them. I mean, Dolby Atmos proper, actual Dolby Atmos soundtracks technically can make use of the front wide speakers if they're there. The renderer can put sounds into those speakers if they happen to go through that position, which that's up to the mixer. But if you're using the Dolby Surround Up mixer to expand all of your existing 5.1 and 7.1 content, it doesn't use the front wides, leaves them completely silent. So kind of a waste. DTS is now changing over to Neural X instead of Neo X. I don't know if Neural X will use front wide speakers. I would think that it would, since it's basically expanding upon what DTS Neo X used to do, but I don't know for 100% sure. And same thing, if it's an actual DTS X soundtrack, it's only going to have sounds coming out of those speakers if they were mixed there.
So what have you heard through your front wide channels?
Neo X is predominantly what I was using. Neo X is an upmixing algorithm, so if you can listen to 2-channel 5.1 or 7.1, and it will upmix it to make use of as many as 11 speakers.
So is it basically detecting what is already kind of to the far right and left and just pulling that bit out and enhancing that separation?
Yeah, there's in the Neo X, what I've found, the reason I liked Neo X even more than the other program that uses front wides, which is Odyssey DSX, which of course is only available on processors that use Odyssey. In Odyssey, what they seemed to be doing was looking at phase relationships and matrixing sound into those front wide channels. That's what it seemed to my ear to be doing. So that was a little bit like the old Panorama type sound. Do you remember those in like Dolby Pro Logic Panorama?
I remember seeing that, yes.
Yeah. And so that was just sort of taking the phase information and then just sort of spreading it out across the front speakers. That's more or less what it sounds like Odyssey DSX is doing. DTS Neo X was sort of taking the directional sounds that went from front, say your front left speaker into your surround left speaker and saying, well, hey, if it panned from front left to surround left, there should be another thing in between there, right? We just skipped about 60 degrees going from your 30 degrees front left speaker to your 90 degrees surround left speaker. We can create another sound that falls in between there. So to me, DTS Neo X was more directional. It did a better job of sort of discreetly putting sounds into the front wide channels, but it's so rarely used that I can't in good conscience suggest really that, I mean, if you have all the money to spend and you don't care, then go for it. But
yeah, if you can afford it and you feel like experimenting, it sounds like that might be fun, but otherwise don't save up to buy it as if you're missing something.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. So then he was thinking about the height channels, because of course there's the front height channels, and now there's these Dolby Atmos overhead, DTS-X overhead channels. Now he's pretty much on board with that, because we know those will be used. Those will be used in a DTS, Neural X upmix. They will be used in a Dolby surround upmixer scenario. So that's not the question. He has EMP Tech Impression Series speakers, and he was like, I don't really want speakers as large or as expensive as the Impression Series bookshelf speakers, and he wasn't too keen on putting the bipole wedge-shaped speakers up on his ceiling either. So EMP Tech sells some smaller bookshelf speakers. They're E3B speakers. They're nice and small, little compact guys. He goes, well, are they going to work? You know, will they timbre match? Will their dispersion be correct for overhead speakers? So I don't know if you had a chance to look at those, Lee.
I'm looking at them right now. You know what they remind me of? They look exactly like these little speakers I used to like when I was a teenager that Radio Shack had. They had these, they were called Minimus 7 or something. And then later they changed them to Optimus 7. They look just like that. They're the same size, same configuration, same woofer tweeter. They weren't as pretty as these, but they were very heavy and dense feeling. And I remember as a teenager, I'd go to Radio Shack all the time and just listen to stuff and play with stuff. And, you know, they'd kick me out eventually because I would turn stuff up too loud. But I remember those little speakers thinking, holy cow, these tiny little speakers sound good. And I kind of wanted a pair, you know.
Actually, on that relates to his question about the dispersion characteristics, because when the speaker gets really, really small, it starts to approximate a point source even better. Sure. As though the sound is just emanating from one little point in space. And that's great. That's exactly what you want for an overhead speaker, because it will create very wide, even dispersion in basically all directions, which is exactly what Dolby wants you to have when they're overhead.
And that's only a 3/4 inch tweeter.
Yeah.
And the tinier the tweeter, the wider the dispersion.
Exactly. So these are actually a really good choice, in my opinion. The other thing is EMP Tech, they are a subsidiary of RBH Sound. And RBH Sound, they, I have to say, this isn't necessarily the case for all brands, but they are masters of timbre matching among their own speakers. It is rare that you find an RBH speaker that sounds characteristically different from any other RBH speaker. You get ones that are a little more refined, you know, have faster transient response, can play louder without distortion, all that type of stuff. That's what you're paying for as you go up in their lineup. That and nicer finishes on the outside.
Oh, yeah.
But as far as the voicing, as far as the timbre match, they're really good. So I would have no qualms saying, yeah, those E3Bs, they're less expensive, they're smaller, easier to hang overhead. Go for them.
And you can get them in white, and they'll blend in with your ceiling.
That's right.
Yeah. And so is it crazy to think that if all the tweeters on all of your speakers are all sort of the same, like a silk dome tweeter, that timbre matching...
Well, it's not...
my brain works that way. You think, well, they're all silk dome tweeters of the same size. My timbre matching ought to be pretty good.
It's not quite that general. Because it isn't just the material. I mean, you could have a completely different magnet. You could have a completely different waveguide. It could be completely different densities of soft dome. It could, you know, all types of things.
If it's literally the same tweeter.
If it's literally the same tweeter, then you should, at least you're starting with the basic waveform coming up. But again, it could have a different waveguide on it. It could have a horn on it. All types of things can be done. So like Tom always says, you know, just the type of tweeter, just the material of the tweeter doesn't really tell you much of anything. You can make a metal dome tweeter timbre match a soft dome tweeter if you're careful enough. It can
I remember him making fun of people who will say when they listen to like an aluminum tweeter or something, it sounds so tinny. Oh, come on.
Because if
it's only because you know what it's made of.
Exactly. So last for Byron S. the first, he was suggesting to his own father, his father lives in Alaska, that he get an SVS subwoofer. They are available through Best Buy up there in Alaska, so it all worked out. His dad actually went for a PC 2000, same sub that Byron has himself. He was like, "There's no way my son is going to have a better sub than me." So he went a little overboard. He really didn't need a sub that large or that expensive.
You know, if you're in Alaska and the kind of winters they have, I would have to have the best home theater in the world to live in Alaska. Of course, I say that as an Alabamian, so.
What convinced him even more is that he actually went to Best Buy and picked up one of the SVS Ultra Series Center speakers. Now, Byron's dad was going from a Bose system to now an SVS Ultra Series Center speaker, and he went, "Oh, there's a bit of a difference here. This SVS sounds just a wee bit better, maybe a lot, but enough that I will buy a larger, more expensive subwoofer from them." So
I do not doubt that.
Sold itself, so that was great. Alrighty, that's our first listener. Now we're moving on to Infinite Gary, because what would AV Rant be without an Infinite Gary question?
I don't know. It would be not infinite, that's for sure. It would be finite AV Rant.
So Gary, of course, has been interested in ELAC ever since Andrew Jones has joined that company, at least the U.S. division. But ELAC has been going in Europe for quite a while, longer than it's been a known brand in North America. And they've done some kind of interesting things. They've got ribbon tweeters that are like concentrically oriented within a ring radiator mid-range. Like, it's really rare to see a driver like that, but ELAC has done that. They have their folded ribbon tweeters as well. But one thing that they did was they created, I'm not even sure what to call it, an omnidirectional super tweeter, I guess is what you would call this thing.
Sure. A little orb on top of a speaker that bounces it out to all directions. I assume the driver's aiming down.
Well, from what they described, it's like a ring.
Or it's a ring vibrating.
It's vibrating, yeah.
Oh.
So it's actually sending out very high frequencies. You can choose where to cross it over to the regular tweeter. So what did they say? You can start at 7,000 hertz and go as high as 15 kilohertz, I think. You have the options in there. But you can cross it over to your regular tweeter, and then it is blasting out very high frequencies, now omnidirectionally. And they're saying, well, this is all about a thing called power response. So if you do the entire take a speaker into an anechoic chamber and take the 70 measurements that Harman would have you take, where they either spin the speaker around or move the microphone all the way around the speaker, so you're getting measurements from every direction around the speaker. Right. You total all of it up, and they call that the power response. And so what you'll find with almost any traditional speaker is that in the bass, the sound is very omnidirectional. Doesn't matter where you measure it from, it's about equally loud. But as you go higher and higher in frequency, it becomes more and more directional. And that's just a matter of the wave lengths getting much, much shorter, and they automatically start to become more directional. So now when you're at the very high frequencies, when you're on axis right in front of the tweeter, it's loudest. But as you move any direction off axis, those high frequencies get quieter. And they're saying, well, the goal should be to have equal power response no matter where you take the measurement from. That's sort of the thinking behind this.
I don't agree.
Nor do I. Nor would Dr. Floyd Toole.
Because no one's standing behind the television watching the movie.
There's that. There's the fact that nothing is mixed. Well, I can't say nothing. Maybe something was mixed on speakers like this, but the vast majority of material was never mixed on speakers like this.
This might be nice if you had a party going on and speakers sort of sitting in the middle of the room and you wanted everybody to hear the highest. Like, you invited over a lot of really sensitive listeners. And you're all going to listen to a lot. Like, let's listen to all these cymbals just being tested.
One speaker in mono in the middle of the room.
Yes.
Well, I mean, hey, Samsung just announced a 360-degree Bluetooth speaker at IFA, so I guess they're on board. There's a bigger problem with this, which is that it's only the super tweeter, right? It's only starting at the lowest 7,000 hertz. So your regular tweeter is still going to be more directional than your deep bass, for sure.
Sure.
I don't really understand this.
So honestly, you would need all of your drivers, at least down to the mid-range frequencies, to be 360-degree
right.
emitters.
Like, if you were going to do this, then all of them should be. Yeah. Like, I could sort of see the thinking there. It still wouldn't sound right, and it would be hugely room and positional dependent.
Hugely. I would never want to try to get that to sound right in a regular drywall living room. I would not.
I can't possibly recommend this. I mean, by all means, if you have some store that's selling this thing and you want to take a listen to it, go for it. But yeah,
sure. Or maybe if you have carpet on your back wall behind your television, carpet, like thick shag carpet back there.
Yeah,
that's all I can think of.
I mean, this is one of those things, though, that is very tweaky because it will sound completely different depending on what room, where you position it, all that kind of stuff. So if you're a person who just loves to tweak it and for some reason you just need your 10 kilohertz sounds to be louder than they are right now, all right. But yeah.
Can't you just turn up the treble?
Super tweeters are silly anyway. It's for the people who believe we can hear more than 20 kilohertz. So anyway,
hey, speaking of Radio Shack, back in the day, they used to sell separate tweeters. You could sit on top of your crappy speaker to make it have better high end. They sold those. I remember as a kid being fascinated by these weird, just separate standalone tweeters you were supposed to wire in to your speaker. Get better speakers.
I wouldn't go for this. Sorry, ELAC, but I'm not a fan. So when Gary also wanted to know, when listening to 5.1 recordings on a 7.1 speaker setup, so you're using something like Dolby Pro Logic 2X, or I don't know, what did DTS have? They had Neo 6 at first. Anyway, something that expands a 5.1 recording to 7.1. He wanted to know what's actually sort of happening to the sounds there. Like the sounds, of course, are only mixed into the surround channels. So the sounds that end up getting derived by this program and played out of the surround back speakers, where are they coming from, and are they sort of being subtracted from the surround channels and then moved into the surround backs, or are the surround backs just sort of duplicating sounds that are still in the surrounds?
I imagine it has to be the same process we talked about just a minute ago with your wide channels. Is it's detecting what is most exclusively in the surrounds and then just taking the parts of the sound that are most exclusive to the surrounds and sending them farther back.
Yeah, well, it's actually really similar to what's going on with the first version of Dolby Pro Logic, where they derived a center channel out of just front left and front right, right? So it's saying, okay, if there's a sound that's equally loud in the two surround channels,
and
that's
it's not
actually
up
supposed
front.
to be, that's actually supposed to be coming from directly behind you, right?
Right.
So that's how you derive, the first sixth channel, like in Dolby Digital EX, where it was 6.1. They're saying, okay, anything that's equally in the surround left and surround right, they actually do subtract it from those channels and then reroute it into the surround back channel. So if you were to listen to the original 5.1 and then switch it over to 7.1, but not actually physically connect to the surround back speakers and only listen to the surround channels,
what would be missing?
Yeah, they would be different. There would actually be some sounds missing because they are funneling some of the sounds that were in the surround channels into the surround back channels. So Gary was, he's thinking ahead to like DTS Neural X, Dolby Surround Up Mixer. He's like, is the same sort of thing going on where they're putting sounds into the overhead speakers, where of course they weren't originally mixed in there? Are they subtracting from the other channels in order to move some of the sounds up there?
I would assume so.
Yeah, it's even harder to tell, I gotta tell you. It's really difficult to determine just listening to your whole system. You'd almost have to do like what I suggested, which is, you listen first originally, but maybe only have like one speaker playing, like just physically disconnect all the others, and then try it again with the processing on to see if there was a difference. They definitely are moving some of the sound, like in my own experience using Dolby Surround Up Mixer, they definitely are moving some of the sounds into the front heights, into the top middles that I was
not
using.
just duplicating.
Not just duplicating. They are taking some of the sounds that used to come from, your surround channel, and now it's coming from overhead.
Because if you did just duplicate sounds, it would make those sounds louder, wouldn't it?
And
now you're ruining the mix.
Yeah, it would make them diffuse as well, because now they're coming from multiple speakers simultaneously. So yeah, they are actually moving it around. So there is a difference going on there, and it's all up to the algorithms they're using as to how it works. And maybe it's not always going to 100% come out correct, because I've certainly heard errors in like Dolby Pro Logic up mixing where it didn't quite come from the right place, but that's what's going on.
But at least it sounded spacious.
Yeah. So we had a little bit more hypothetical question too, which is what would happen if you listen to an Atmos soundtrack, or I guess a DTS X soundtrack as well, using like those old vintage quadraphonic headphones
that actually had drivers behind the back of your ear.
Yeah,
and in front of your ear.
That's right. Yeah,
did those have a special 4-ring connector or something? How did you get all 4 channels?
Yeah, because they were meant to connect to an actual quadraphonic system.
Right.
That would be a thing to hook. That would be a thing to hook up, Gary. I don't know. You'd need some sort of converter that would go to the thing that can actually drive those quadraphonic headphones.
I guess you could take your analog 7-channel out, and then you'd have to combine some
But that wouldn't really work because you wouldn't actually have Atmos at that point.
No, you wouldn't.
Yeah, you'd almost need to take like. Okay, so let's say you had like an 11-channel processor. So the decoding's been done. It's created the 11 speakers.
Yes.
You have now pre-outs for the 11 speakers. Then you'd have to somehow combine some of them into
you need some like mixers or something.
Yeah, into just front, left, right, and surround left, right, like there was in quadraphonic, and then put that into a thing that it could actually drive those headphones. Tell you what, Gary.
I'm really laughing because I'm picturing someone just go out and buy 4 pair of headphones and put like one driver on top of your head and one on your nose up front, and then just like 2 around each ear.
I think what might work better is to wait for DTS Headphone X to come out in some processors, because DTS, that's what they're all about. They're like, hey, we want to take one mix, one object audio mix in DTS X format and play that through a DTS Headphone X processor. And that will replicate the 11 speakers that were in the original DTS X mix.
Wow.
So that's the way I would come at this, Gary. I got to be honest.
Yeah, there'd be no way to use the quadraphonic. But it's a funny thought. I like the idea of taking a football helmet and cutting away foam on the inside and mounting drivers all around.
Yeah. Yeah, more than just
what happens.
More than just the pod system that some people have said, or like the bedroom setup, like the around your bed setup. No, actually a helmet. That's that'd be one way.
Instead of a 4-post bed, you have like an 11-post bed.
Yeah, yeah. 11-post bed.
Perfect. At the top of each post is a speaker aiming down at you. The box springs are actually subwoofers.
It still beats that NHK 22.2 channel system that they're still touting for 8K. Like they won't let it go. I'm like, NHK, 8K. Channels are done. We don't need to mix into 22.2 dedicated channels. We have object-based audio now. It didn't exist when you came up with this. I'm not blaming you, but please let it go.
How big would your screen have to be for 8K to make a difference?
You just have to sit super close, man. That's all.
Really close, where you couldn't see the corners of the screen. God.
So we're on to Byron S. the second.
Second
I told you there was another Byron S. He just sent along a fun little CNET poll. This was by Jeff Morrison. And he's asking, is 3D TV dead? More importantly, do you care? He's not been a big fan of 3D, so this was just a fun poll. I responded to it, of course, in comments. But Lee, how do you feel? Is 3D TV dead?
It's dead-ish. Okay, like it's not ever going to be a mass market thing, and I'm going to tell you why. Because people don't want to sit around watching TV with crap on their head. It makes it very difficult, because sometimes I want to lean over and lay down and watch for a while. Mm-hmm. You're in various snuggle positions with your chosen mate, and you're on it doesn't work, and it gets on your nerves after a while. So the idea of 3D is fantastic. And I think as we get into these Oculus Rift things and these various VR headsets, I think that's where you're going to be able to have that you're going to be absorbed into a different environment. And that's when it's going to be amazing. I just think it's the glasses that kill it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I said the stupidest thing they ever did was that when it first came out, and this actually never really went away, all the ones that had the active shutter glasses, which was the majority, you couldn't use them across different brands, right? Yes. You bought a Panasonic TV, the glasses didn't work on a Samsung TV. I mean, eventually some of them kind of got together in a bit of an alliance, but it was never all of them.
Right.
How did you think that was ever going to play out? Like, not only is this VHS versus beta, this is every brand has their own format. Like, why would you think that was a good idea? That was the dumbest thing they ever did. It deserves to die. Even though I'm a fan of 3D movies,
right. So the idea of 3D is amazing. Like, I went and saw Avatar, and besides the stupid plot, it was really cool to look at.
You don't like Fern Gully?
It was really beautiful to look at, and I thought, okay, you could really do movies like this if you were careful, and we're all sitting upright with glasses on. Mm-hmm. But things on my head, get it off my head. And that's the problem. It's kind of like video phones. I mean, I know we're sitting here talking over Google Hangouts right now, but we could have had video phones 30 years ago if we were dying for them, but nobody really wanted them.
Yeah, no
because we
kidding.
want to talk on the phone in the bathroom. We want to talk on the phone when we look terrible.
When you first wake up or while you're cooking or whatever,
Yeah.
right? Like, yeah, exactly.
There's a million places we want to talk on the phone, and very, very rarely everybody talks about that grandmother looking at their grandkids.
Yeah,
and that's going to sell all the video phones.
Yeah,
so it's the same thing with 3D. It's really amazing to be sort of pulled into a real world that looks 3D, but I don't want to do that every night.
So, I mean, I do actually think 3D TVs are definitely dying. Vizio has not seen any ill effects from removing 3D TVs from their entire lineup as far as sales go. All these Ultra HD 4K televisions, the Ultra HD formats, 3D is not included, so it's only there if they're supporting it on the old 2D format in 1080p. So it's definitely dying. I do kind of care for the sole reason of all I want is whatever is in the movie theater, I want to be able to watch at home.
Preach.
And 3D, 3D is a part of that. 3D is an option. I don't want it forced upon me, but if it was 3D in the theater, I want at least the option to watch it that way at home.
Right.
That's what I would personally like, but I'll get over it.
But that's like saying I want to see the letterboxed full 2.35 to 1 image of a movie. If the movie was meant to be in 3D, like Avatar was,
sure,
I want to see what takes me there and gives me the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. And then every now and then I might like it. I watched a football game like that one time, and I liked that a lot. But glasses.
All right. Well, nobody's really crying over the death of 3D. And you know what? It'll come back because it always does. So
with the VR headsets.
VR, exactly. So let's move along to Todd B. He's a new listener. He heard us mention, it's just sort of in passing, that the cheapest Odyssey Multi-EQ XT32 is the Denon AVR X4000 that we've talked about so much. He wanted to correct us. He said there is the Onkyo TX-NR818. I actually own one of those. It's sitting in a box going unused. If anyone wants an 818, hit me up, rob@avrant.com.
No, might be interested. Let me look at that.
Yeah? Okay. Yeah, because I will definitely sell it at a good price. He was saying he saw them listed on Accessories for Less for $499. But the reason we weren't really mentioning that is because they are very sporadic in stock. It's definitely an older model at this point. Like right this second, it's not available. It's not listed anywhere on Accessories for Less right now. So if they happen to get a unit in, then it'll go up there. So that's kind of what, like, the X4000 was widely available. It was in stock all the time.
Right.
Plus, it had some kind of cool features that the 818 didn't really have. Like, it has sub EQ HT, it has Odyssey LFC, that's their low frequency containment if you want to play around those things. It has network connection and stuff like that. So, there's a few things there. But yeah, he's right. I knew about the 818, but yeah, it's not always there. So worth looking for, though, if that's what you're looking for. He shared a couple of neat articles that were part of a blog called A Brief Guide to Audio for the Skeptical Consumer.
For the intelligent consumer.
Right, yeah, pretty much, yeah. One of them was all the things that you should not believe, that some audiophiles and some magazines espouse as, making all the difference, and then some things that you should believe, because he mentioned that after he wrote the first article, people were like, oh, you're just one of those people who thinks nothing makes a difference. Like, listen to anything, the cheapest thing, it all sounds the same. He's like, no, there's stuff that makes a genuine difference. Spend your money there.
Yes.
On this other stuff. What did you think of these articles, Lee? Because
I loved them.
Yeah,
I loved them. Yeah, especially that first one, because as a person who tries to be very science-minded, I need you to prove to me that something's better, and some things just don't pass the sniff test. And I've had, I won't say arguments, but discussions with people about vinyl and speaker cables and stuff like that. And there's an objective reality to this world. Things can be measured. That's how science works.
Yeah.
There's a reality.
And they can be compared blind, where you don't know what the difference is, or even if there is a difference. And if it's real, you ought to be able to detect it with your own human senses. Imagine that. Yeah, I have to say, it's rare that I come across an article where I don't have something to nitpick about it.
No, there's nothing.
This is one of them. There's nothing here that I would disagree with. The only thing I might change if I had edited this was that in the second article where he's saying things that do make a difference, the first thing he mentions is about subwoofers and positioning of a single subwoofer within a room. and making sure that you're using at least a subwoofer when listening to music as well as listening to movies, which I 100% agree with.
Because you want all the frequencies.
Exactly. It's quite a ways further down in the list before he mentioned multiple subs. Okay. He included it. I just would have made it the next bullet point. That is like the only edit I could have made to this. I was amazed because normally I have plenty to disagree with.
Rant. This is the two subwoofer show.
That's right. Well, hey, if you're going to mention positioning one subwoofer carefully, really you should mention that, two subwoofers positioned carefully is even better. So, sure. Yeah, but these are great articles. We'll have the links posted at avrant.com. What he does is he posts a lot of quotes or links out to other articles where you can read the information that he's quoting or talking about. But yeah, great information here. So Nathan, thank you very much. It really is.
Especially if you think you're going to get into some higher end purchases. If you have some money to burn on this, you want the best. That's a really good set of articles to read.
Yeah, good stuff. So the last one from last week, we're actually going to make it through. Robert W. He recently had a chance to spend a number of hours high-end audio store listening to a bunch of speakers that he would never consider for himself just because of the price point. But he actually found it to be an amazing experience. It gave him a better appreciation of much higher end equipment than what he's using himself in his own home. And after he was listening to all of that, he went back to his own house and turned on his own system and turned on some music. And he says, "Oh, it kind of sounds a little bit muddled, and I'm having to kind of concentrate and strain to hear some of the stuff that sounded a lot crisper and more detailed at the store." And so it was, this by subtraction, by omission, right? You don't realize what you're missing until you hear it, and then you try to go back.
Exactly.
And that's when you realize that
I remember that effect when I was first seeing high definition televisions. If I spent time watching a high def TV, it wasn't so much that my mind was exploded by the high def TV. It was nice, right? But it was when you went back home to your crappy low def TV and it looked like a porthole in a submarine. You're like, what is this crap? How am I watching?
I've totally felt the same. Like when I first got I didn't get a Blu-ray player first. I got an HD DVD player first because they were the first ones to hit $99. So I got an HD DVD player first, and the first thing I threw on was Batman Begins. And Batman Begins, if I recall correctly, that disc was a flipper disc. It had an HD DVD on one side and a regular DVD on the other.
Okay.
And so, or it was 300 that had that, but anyway, I had the Batman Begins on DVD. So I was comparing them, and I was watching the HD DVD, and I was disappointed at first. I'm like, this doesn't look worlds better than regular DVD. But then I got used to HD DVDs, and then I went back to DVDs. I was like, oh, everything does look kind of fuzzy.
Yeah.
So,
it's always when you try to go back.
It's always when you try to go back.
So if you can't afford new speakers, you might not want to go listen to really good high-end speakers. I've had that happen to me before.
So there is that. He had that experience, but that's not the end of the story. Robert, of course, continued to listen to his own system at home. Yeah. And he said after a couple of days, when he'd forgotten essentially what the speakers in the store sounded like, he had no problem hearing things. Dialogue wasn't difficult to understand. He wasn't like saying, oh, there's details missing. It's like he went back. His brain readjusted to what he was listening to. So it led him to think that, is there sort of like a minimum standard where as long as your sound system, your speakers meet this minimum standard, your brain will basically compensate for the setting, for the positioning, for the speakers themselves, perhaps not being, the absolute cleanest, lowest distortion that they could be. Is there sort of this base level that we could all obtain, and then everything above that is gravy, and it's a really sharp, like, what do you call it? Diminishing returns.
Yeah, I would say yes-ish. If you remember, the last time I was on the show with, it was four of us.
Yeah.
And I think we talked about what's good, better, and best on speakers. Do you remember that conversation? And what constitutes good, better, and best, or something to that effect?
Sure. Yeah.
I can't remember the three categories, but we said something like that. And so, yeah, there is sort of a point where I always say there's this graph where the performance to price graph, right? And so if you want better performance, you can spend a little more money, but then you hit a point where the money starts to skyrocket to get you any better performance. And at that little point in that asymptotic curve, that's where you want to buy stuff, right? Because when you go past that, you can get into crazy land. And that's different for every product, and it might be a little different for every person in their ears. But there's kind of, I don't know. To me, it's sort of receivers that cost $700 are kind of in that curve for me.
Sure.
Speakers that are $1,000 a pair are kind of in that curve for me. I mean, just in general, right?
Yeah. No,
So
I mean,
many
I
exceptions.
I agree. I mean, what you need, the speaker has to, like, this is what I said in that whole discussion of good, better, best, right? To at least be called a good speaker, it has to at least produce all the frequencies in the recording.
Sure.
Because if it is literally not producing some of the frequencies, it's got a rolled off high end, or you don't have a subwoofer in your system, so you're just plain missing a bunch of bass, or it has some really weird, funky frequency response curve that is never going to be flat, no matter how much you can try to correct it. Like, if that's what you're getting, you have a fundamental problem where there are sounds just plain missing, or they will never be at the volume level they're supposed to be.
Right. It has to at least get the sound into the air.
Into the room, exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Once you've done that, then I mean, I talk about all the time limiting factors. What's the limiting factor of your system? It very well might be your room. It very well might be the available positions you have for where to put your speakers. Instead of the speakers themselves, it's not really their fault anymore. Now it's some other aspect of your system that is limiting your ultimate sound quality. So once you reach that inflection point, I'd say the speakers are quote unquote good enough, at least good enough for your setup, because they're no longer the thing holding you back, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And it, basically, as we say all the time, is it making you happy?
Yeah. But he's
don't sit around
right.
worrying about if you're missing something, if you're happy.
Yeah.
If you're enjoying that movie and it sounds fantastic, you go, ooh, that sounded great. Don't worry about if there's another sound in there until you get ready to spend some money.
Yeah, no, I mean, our brains are fantastic at adapting. I mean, that's what break-in actually is, going back to those articles about things that are real and aren't. Speaker burn-in, break-in. That's your brain.
That's brain break-in.
Your brain learning to compensate for the new sound. That's what's actually going on there. So absolutely, our brains are very good at adapting. So moving on, he had another thing to say, which is that the builder for his new home has moved to a new flooring system, and for some reason it necessitated him having a different support structure for the floor above. I'm not exactly sure why. I guess the flooring above, maybe it was a lot heavier, so they had to add extra support in the floor below. So he ended up basically with a whole additional wall in what was going to be his planned theater space. Originally there was a 20-foot by 25-foot room that was going to be his theater. Now, because there's this extra support wall holding up the floor above, it's basically 20 feet by 20 and a half feet. Oof. So very close to now being a square.
Right.
So he's heard us mention about square room not being the greatest. He says avoid at all costs, which we haven't quite said, but not ideal. If you have a choice of not having a square room, we'd prefer that. But he's not really sure why. Why do you want to avoid a square room? So he'd like us to explain and what might be some options to help mitigate the problems he's going to face.
Standing waves.
Yes.
It's when sound waves add to each other or subtract from each other, and certain frequencies at certain distances will add to each other, and you'll get peaks in the frequency response graph. You'll get certain bass notes that are really boomy and everything else is normal. Or you might have some frequency, and it's oftentimes in the bass frequencies, the frequency disappears because the two sound waves hit each other at just the right moment to cancel each other out. That's why a square room is just so perfect. So in two directions, the same frequencies are canceling or adding or adding. So that's why a square room is bad.
Yes. Now there is a way to mitigate this problem. 4 subwoofers. Mm-hmm. You would need a subwoofer in each corner of the room or one at the midpoint of each wall. Because once you do that, now you have essentially created active bass traps at all 4 walls, so you remove those standing waves. If you only use 2 subwoofers in a square room, you can eliminate the standing wave in one direction, but not in the other, and they happen to be the same. So that's the solution. You're going to actually need 4 subs if you want to avoid standing wave problems in a square room.
Would it help him at all, since we're in the building phase, to actually make the room a little shorter in one direction? So it's like not 20 by 20 and a half, but 20 by 19.
He could do that.
How much would that help?
That's probably more expensive than getting 4 subs, though, when you think about it.
Oh, really?
And you shrank your room. You shrank your room.
By a half a foot? Not much.
Well, you'd probably want to do a little bit more than that.
Foot.
Yeah, you'd probably want to do a little bit more than just a half a foot.
Well, you're the guy that can do the calculations. Tell me how that affects the frequency, because those distances affect the frequencies, and then maybe you just create nulls in a couple of directions that are slightly different frequency than the ones in
20 feet is long enough. That's a low enough note. You might be talking about not even a full semitone by having a half a foot distance. So
that's deep down in the subwoofer's frequencies.
Yeah. Because down at 20 feet, we're talking about 20 hertz is a 55-foot wave. So, 40 hertz is half.
Come on,
of
off the top of your head,
Yeah,
let's do it.
We're up in sort of 45, 50 hertz range.
Yeah.
And by only adding a half a foot, then it's not even a semitone.
Right.
Not even one key on a piano. Difference. So you'd want a little bit more than that if you're doing the building.
But I hate to tell somebody to go buy 4 subs to fix the problem.
How dare you, sir? How dare you?
I'm sorry. I come in here as the guy that has not a lot of cash. And, he's already building a house. I don't know how much money he has, but he's going to have all these surprises building the house itself, and he might not want to run out and spend another $1,000 on
Lee,
subs.
we should all aspire to 4 subwoofers. He just happens to have a great excuse. You've got to look at this as half glass full.
Right.
Robert, you wanted 4 subwoofers anyway, because we all do. And now you have a fantastic reason why you need 4, not just one.
Now you get to say, honey, it's a structural issue.
Exactly.
It's structural. This is the foundation of our house and of our base. So it has to happen now.
All joking aside, Robert, that is actually the solution if you have a square room.
That's a solution.
So okay, we're on to this week. Yay. I think we're, about an hour in because we started late. So John S., he has some Sierra 2 speakers for his mains and center. He's got them in a room that is 9 feet by 24 feet by 30 feet. So obviously the 9 is the height.
He has it in a platform.
Yeah. I don't think it's a 9-foot wide room with a 30-foot high ceiling. All right, so
it's a platform 9 feet wide and 24 inches deep.
That's a good. You can read, I cannot. So that's what's going on there. It's inches here. We're talking. Okay, so 9 feet wide platform, and then 24 inches deep, 30 inches high, or somewhere thereabouts.
Yeah, usually the depth goes last, so I guess it's only 2 feet high and 30 inches deep.
2 feet high, 30 inches deep. Okay. Yeah, that might work. Anyway, that's under his display. All right, forget all the room stuff I just said. It's a platform under his display. He's got his Sierra 2 mains and center inside there. He also has a subwoofer in there. It's an HSU VTF3 Mark V. That is a big 15-inch loud subwoofer. So it's inside
that platform.
Yeah, that's right. It's right underneath his center channel, so it's basically centered in his room. That is, if you have one subwoofer and you have a rectangular room, according to all the Harman research, that's where you want it. Middle of your front wall, right underneath your center channel. So he's got a grate that's in front of that so the sound can come through, but his babies cannot get in there and poke their fingers into it.
Poke it!
Which is a good thing. So before, he had his subwoofer in a corner, and he measured the response. He played some bass sweeps. He used an SPL meter, and he graphed out the response. And he found that when the sub was in the corner, he had this big 12 decibel hump right at 50 hertz.
Standing wave.
And when he moved the sub to this center location on the center of his front wall, that it didn't go away entirely, but it was drastically reduced.
Because the corner makes it worse.
So yeah, there's a few things going on here, because he was asking what's really going on here. Obviously it was louder, he could hear it and he could measure it.
Yeah.
But is this just a matter of it's the corner reinforcing the sound, or does the position really make that much of a difference? What's really going on there? Why did he have this 12 dB hump at 50 hertz when the sub was in one place, and then he moves the sub and it went away? How does that work?
That's because of the corner, yes?
Well, it's a combination. So first of all, having the sub in the corner does give you boundary reinforcement. It gives you triple boundary reinforcement because you have the floor and 2 walls all reinforcing the sound. But that should act across all frequencies. It just makes everything louder. Right. So why this particular hump at 50 hertz, when he measured it the first time, he's thinking, standing waves, the dimensions of my room didn't change. Why would I have a different standing wave? It's not that you had a different standing wave. It's that you were measuring in one seat with the sub in that one spot, which created the pattern of the standing wave where you happen to be in the hump. That's what was created based on the relationship between where the seat is relative to the sub. You happen to be where the hump got created. Now you move the sub over and you shift the position of the standing wave, right? So now the seat relative to the subwoofer is getting a slightly different pattern. Now, if you move to a different seat, you might find that having it in the center of the room actually created a new standing wave for a different seat that wasn't there when the sub was in the corner.
Right.
So when you have one subwoofer, that's what's going. You get this unevenness of bass from position to position within the room. Where you measure makes as much difference as where the sub is placed.
Right. So when it was in the corner, if he had walked around with that SPL meter and a 50 hertz tone playing, he would have found areas where it was quieter and louder and quieter and louder.
Exactly.
And he could have sort of in 3D mapped out where those nulls and high points were if he walked around with the SPL meter. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, he actually would have found nulls, and so if he had chosen to measure in a different spot, he might have said, "I had this huge suck out, this 30 decibel suck out at 50 hertz, and now that's been mitigated." Right. It is this reciprocal relationship between position of the measurement and the position of the subwoofer, which is why the subwoofer crawl works.
That's why it works with one sub. Yeah.
Yeah, that's all you're doing is switching those positions. Now you're taking the sub, putting it in your seat, and then you are moving around instead of leaving the seat where it is and moving the subwoofer around. But it's the same thing. It alters the wave pattern within the room because it's a very complex thing that's going on. We have to remember there are lots of reflections happening in the room at bass frequencies, piles and piles of them. So if you were to look at the fluid dynamics analysis over a long period of time, the humps and bumps and dips of the waves in your room is a tremendously complex thing to try and calculate. So that's what was going on there. Now he has a Pioneer VSX 1120 that has MCACC, as Pioneer did. He's heard us say we're not huge fans of
You've bad-mouthed MCACC. Yes, you have. I've heard you do it.
He wants to know
Tom hates it.
He wants to know what the heck curve is Pioneer going for? Like, how could it be so bad? What are they targeting that could make it this EQ system that we're not a fan of? And what type of changes, like if he ran it and then wanted to alter it using the manual EQ that's available, what would he need to do to compensate for it to get a response that's closer to what we would approve of or something like that? So that's the first part that he's asking about there.
That I don't know. I don't have experience with MCACC. I don't know what it's measuring differently. Certainly to God, they're not going for a different, they have to be going for flat, right?
No,
really?
They are going for the Air Studios in London.
What?
They partnered up with the Air Studios in London, and what they did is they took their speakers. I believe they took the TAD speakers that Andrew Jones made, the $80,000 per pair speakers. They took them there, set them up in the Air Studios mixing room. They played just frequency sweeps, all frequencies equal, recorded that response on a microphone, put it into a real-time analyzer to see what the frequency response was, and that became their target curve.
Wow.
They said that is what a flat signal should sound like in any room because this is the magic Air Studios room.
The entirety of MCACC was intended to make your living room sound like one particular studio in England. That is ridiculous. I instantly hate it as much as Tom. I hate it. Never heard it.
Problem. There's a huge big problem with trying to do that by only looking at a real-time analyzer and frequency response, because they kind of forgot about all the time aspects, that your room is not the size of the Air Studios mixing room.
No, it's not.
Your room does not have the same absorptive and diffusive qualities as the walls of the Air Studios mixing room. So, okay, what the microphone picked up, you're now trying to reverse engineer, right? All they did was create an inverse wave, an inverse filter. So they turned it upside down, and they said, all right, if it doesn't match this, then, that's our target curve. We want it to look like the frequency response curve that a flat signal produced inside this Air Studios. So there are tremendous problems with trying to do. You can't just invert a frequency response and get a good result because there are all the reflections and all the time domain things to consider, and they didn't do any of that. Not in the original MCACC.
That just reminds me of all the ridiculous effects on Yamaha amplifiers. Yeah. Church. I want everything I watch to sound like church.
That's right. Which is basically reverb.
Yeah, it's just reverb.
Now, what could you do in the manual EQ to fix this? Nothing.
Turn it off.
turn it off. That is the only thing you can do, because just trying to change the frequency response, it doesn't work. You have to address the timing issues. So just turn it off. That's the best thing you can do.
Wow, I did not know that. That is the weirdest thing.
Now, that's not the case anymore. MCACC Pro is a completely different program. It is now addressing things in the time domain. It is now actually EQing the bass, which the original ACC didn't do.
It doesn't have a flat choice now instead of this one particular studio?
So, so MCACC Pro, okay, but the original, like what he has, not so much. Now, he has his Radio Shack SPL meter. He was saying, is that accurate enough to graph out the response and then create a correction curve? Again, there's a big problem when you're only doing it at one measurement position.
Right.
I wouldn't attempt to just sit in your one seat, even with the SPL meter on a tripod. And I mean, you can't just play a sweep, because you wouldn't be able to really graph that correctly. By hand, you'd have to play tones at every, 1/6, 1/12 of an octave. Right. The SPL meter is not tremendously accurate. There are graphs that give corrections. It's mostly inaccurate in the deep bass. So, but deep bass is also where you tend to need EQ the most. So you would want those correction graphs to do it. When you get all of that, what you can do is use a program like Room EQ Wizard, because Room EQ Wizard has the correction values programmed into it for the Radio Shack SPL meter. So it's actually not too bad. If you do it that way, I wouldn't try to use it for higher frequencies because they're just too finicky. But with the correction values that are already within Room EQ Wizard, you could use the Radio Shack SPL meter, and it would be reasonable. I don't have any huge problem with doing that. You can get more accurate, more precise results with a better microphone. I do want to say it's not like there's no reason to ever get a better microphone, but it's not a tremendously bad idea. It's certainly a fine starting point if you're using Room EQ Wizard. But
because the mic on that
position.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the microphone on that Radio Shack SPL meter can't be a whole lot worse than the little tiny mics that come with AV receivers nowadays. Like, for instance, I got with my newer Yamaha. It looks like it can't be a whole lot better than a computer microphone that used to be used in the 90s. It's tiny. It doesn't look like much. So
yeah, it is a C-weighted microphone, so it's really only accurate from about 80 hertz to about 8,000. Well, not even 8,000, maybe 5,000 hertz. Right. So there's sort of that range in there where that's okay. Above and below that, it's really not very accurate at all. So but as long as you have the correction values, it's certainly not a bad starting point. So you can do that, but please measure in more than one position, because you want to see what is due to the response of your speakers and what is due to your room, and you'll see that if you measure in more than one place. So last, he is just wanted to mention he's got twins, 1 years old, and he's getting them accustomed to sleeping through bass heavy movies, and he says it's working.
Yes,
he just plays deep bass all night, and they still sleep.
I've heard that from parents. Just live your life, do everything you normally did, and the kids will just learn to sleep. They just will. I've seen that happen. My dog is wonderful about that. The louder it gets in the living room, the happier he is, because he knows we're going nowhere.
There you go.
When the bass is thumping, he's like, oh, yeah.
If you played like pulsating deep bass, wouldn't that remind them of the womb or something?
I think it just reminds them that we're stuck in the living room for the next hour and a half because we're watching a movie. And he's so happy about that.
So Carl R., he's all set to have his 2 SVS cylinder subs. I believe he's going for 1 Ultra and 1 Plus because he found them used.
Right.
But he's going to have 2 of them. He's already got his AV receiver, which is the flagship Denon, the AVR X7200WA. Ooh, nice stuff.
Right.
So that X7200WA has 2 subwoofer outputs. All right, 2 subwoofer outputs, 2 subs.
Sure.
Seems like we're good. But he noticed that the cylinder subs on the back each have 2 inputs. They have a right input and a left input. And so he was like, do I need a Y splitter? Do I need to take the output for sub 1 and then split it into 2 so that I can plug into the left and right and do the same thing for sub number 2? He was looking into that, and he found a Y splitter listed on Crutchfield from Monster Cable for $15. He's like, is this what I need? Female in to 2 male outs. Is this what I need? I know you know the answer to this, Lee.
I would think, first of all, you don't need a $15 monster cable, even if you did need the Y splitter. My guess is you just plug it into the one that says left, and it works. Is that right?
That is absolutely right.
Thank
yes.
you. Yes.
You do not need a Y splitter to begin with. And let's say you were using 4 subwoofers. Let's say you were Robert W. and you were using 4 subwoofers, and your AV receiver only has 2 subwoofer outputs. Then you do need Y splitter.
Yes.
You do. you need 2 Y splitters, in fact, to turn the 2 outputs into 4. But my word, does it not need to cost $15? And please don't buy things from Monster Cable.
No, you don't have to do that.
Ugh.
Go to Monoprice or something.
I don't know. I might get in trouble with litigious. I mean, Lord knows Monster Cable is litigious, but please don't buy from them. They're not a good company.
Yeah, they're counting every time you say Monster or and I say Monster, and we already owe them like $7,000.
Yeah,
we'll hear from their lawyers tomorrow.
So, go over to Parts Express. They have perfectly good Y splitters for 90 cents. So, go nuts. They actually get cheaper if you buy more of them.
But he doesn't need them in this case.
But you don't need them. No, just either or. It doesn't matter. You plug it into the left or the right. They go to the same place inside of an SPS sub. So
right, because it's not like it has dual voice coils or something. It's not like there's two separate.
They're there for the people who have a stereo only setup that has no subwoofer output. So now if you want to get bass from both the left and the right channels, then you need 2 inputs, right? You need a left and a right input so you can actually get all the bass, not just the bass from one channel. But when you're using a dedicated subwoofer output, then you don't have to worry. You just plug it into one of them and off you go. Their quick start guide that comes with the sub says, hey, plug it in here and off you go.
Yeah, and I've noticed over time that most devices that can accept a mono signal, they like it in the left.
Yeah.
That's just been
really
what I've noticed.
Matter.
It probably does, but I've had some equipment that said you plug it in the left if it's mono, and it'll... Remember that from like a Sony camcorder or something. I'd plug it in the left, and I'd go, I bet that works.
There you go. Yeah. It also doesn't matter if you have a sub on your left wall and a sub on your right wall. You don't have to, correspond to
use the right input if it's sitting to the right.
All a mono signal. So,
but anyway. Somebody out there is trying to sell right-hand specific subwoofers. Somebody is doing that, I'm sure. Right?
Probably. All the nutty stuff we've seen. So he has some Martin Logan Ascent speakers for his front, left, and rights. Very nice speakers. He's always set them to large in the past, but he's heard us talking. We're like, always set your speakers to small. Use your bass management. So the auto setup program, the Odyssey Multi-Q XT32 program that does the auto setup in his X7200WA AV receiver, we have to mention Odyssey does not decide whether to set the speakers to large or small. They just give the information to the manufacturer, and the manufacturer decides, in this case Denon, whether to set your speakers to large or small, where to set the crossover frequency. That's up to the Odyssey.
I was surprised the little YPOW in my receiver thought my surround speakers were large.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, good on you, little surround speaker. You sounded large.
Yeah, not so much. So he noticed that I did go ahead and set them to large when he ran the auto setup. He's like, should I really go back in there and manually set them to small and set it to start at 8 Hz crossover frequency and only go up or down if I'm not getting a good blend between my speakers and my subwoofers when I play a bass sweep? Yes, they should be set to small. They should always be set to small, especially when you have, 2 very good subwoofers that are going to be nicely placed in your room. The whole idea is that by using the multiple subs, you are getting uniform bass throughout your room. You're not getting that thing we talked about with the single subwoofer where it changes from seat to seat, and it changes depending on where you put the subwoofer in the room, how it changes from seat to seat. No, you have 2 subs, they're across the room from one another, and you've just created much more uniform bass throughout your room. Not necessarily linear, but uniform.
So is it the case that your crossover frequency that sends things to your sub, that is the frequency at which it cuts off anything you say is small speaker? Is that
well, it's not. I mean, it's not a brick wall.
Right.
But basically, like, let's say you chose an 80 hertz crossover.
Yeah.
It means that your speakers play linearly down to just above 80 hertz, usually like 85 hertz or something like that, and then just starts to taper off. So it gets quieter and quieter and quieter in the speakers below 80 hertz.
Right.
And then the subwoofer plays nice and linear from 20 hertz all the way up to just slightly before 80 hertz, so like 75 hertz or so. And then it gets quieter and quieter and quieter above 80 hertz. So that is why it's a crossover. Right? It's not a butt end joint. So it is a crossover. But yeah, the speakers are getting quieter below that point.
I'm glad we don't have to figure out the butt end frequency on all these amplifiers and speakers.
That would be a weird transition. But yeah, the speakers, when you set them to large, they're not sending anything off to the subwoofer now. They're just attempting to play everything down to 20 hertz. If somebody has mixed a 20 hertz sound into your front left speaker, now your front left speaker is trying to play that, and your subwoofer isn't even trying to play that.
So large literally means I can play it all. I'm sending nothing from this speaker to the sub.
That's right. Full range. Okay. Full range, right? Which is why you don't want to do it, because hardly any speakers can do it to begin with. And even if they could, you run into the problem now you have a source of bass that is in one location in your room, which means from seat to seat it's going to sound different. You don't
Guess
want
what I'm
that.
doing, and we have to talk about me at some point.
Oh yes, yeah, we got to make sure we leave time. I'm going to see if we can get through at least like 10 of these.
Oh yeah, let's do it.
Yep. So that's that part. And lastly, we were joking. We even named the podcast last week "Leather Curtains." He actually found some leather window treatments. He went looking, and there are leather window treatments, not curtains so much. These like hang over the window, but yeah, he found them.
Oh, that's very sort of cowboy looking though. Yeah, that's not like the dark, mysterious vampire house I was picturing with leather curtains. That's more like cowboy gross. That's just ew.
I want some animal in my room, and that's what it's going to be.
It just looks like flaps of flesh over the windows. That looks terrible.
That's kind of what leather is. Jonathan. Jonathan has been dealing with this what room to choose in his vacation home and setting up his whole system, trying to get the price down to about $7,000. That's including a nice leather couch that he wants to have in there. So he's feeling pretty good about all the choices he's made now for speaker stands and seats and overall placement and everything like that. He also received word from ELAC that his speakers should be shipping by the end of September. They said third week of September. We expect them in the warehouse, and we'll ship them up then. So
his pre-order
is in. Yep. Now, he did read something in the manual of his Denon AVR X2200W. That's the receiver he went with, 7.2 channel. It gave him a bit of pause because he isn't sure if he'll ever actually use the audio return channel function.
Okay.
But his TV is going to be this Vizio. The Vizio has a bunch of apps built into it. So if he's using the apps, the Netflix app, the MGO app, whatever it is, inside of his Vizio TV, it'd be kind of nice to get sound out of there too.
Yeah.
And it's more convenient if you can just use the audio return channel, because what that does is you will have an HDMI connection going from the video output of your Denon receiver, because you're plugging all your sources into the Denon, it's switching between all of your sources, and then sending one HDMI output to your TV.
Right.
Well, the audio return channel lets you use that very same connection to send audio from the TV into the AV receiver. So you don't need an additional audio connection when you're using the built-in TV apps. He noticed that the manual said, if you're going to use ARC, turn HDMI control, aka HDMI CEC.
The thing we also hate.
He said it says turn that on when you're going to use ARC. So he's like, so does that mean ARC doesn't work unless HDMI CEC is on? And since we've always said HDMI CEC is prone for causing problems, you'd never imagine that's what the cause of it is, but so for some reason turning HDMI CEC off solves a lot of weird problems. He's like, does that mean I can't use ARC? Any guesses there, Lee?
I would think those are two separate functions, because HDMI CEC was added after the ARC function. I would think those are two separate things. It should be okay. Why would they tell him to leave it on?
Yeah, they are separate things. If you turn HDMI control off, but you turn ARC on, you should absolutely still be able to get sound going from the TV into the receiver.
I'm just wondering why Denon is saying do this with this receiver.
I believe it's because if you don't do it, then you still need two remotes. And you have to be smart enough to remember that you have to turn your TV on, you have to turn your AV receiver on, and then you have to control the volume with your AV receiver's remote, whereas you change the apps or control the apps with your TV's remote. Whereas if you turn HDMI CEC on, then you can only use the TV's remote. When you turn it on, it will automatically power up the Denon, and you can use the TV's volume up and down buttons, and now it will control the Denon instead of the TV.
Denon's worried about users not knowing where the sound is.
I believe so.
Okay.
I believe so. So it's not that it won't function, it's just it's not as convenient, and potentially it's more confusing, and I think that's what they're trying to avoid, but it is weird that they're telling you to turn it on as though, like, they don't say it will or won't work, they just say turn it on. But yeah, you really shouldn't have to. But you just have to be smart enough to know that your volume is a separate remote from your TV. That's all.
Yeah. And we're all smart enough because we're listening to a podcast about AV.
Yeah. So Jonathan also wanted to get back to sending us long articles because he gets a kick out of that. This one's really not that bad, though. So it's over at Digital Trends, and they posted an article describing Sennheiser 3D, which is actually a new recording technique where they use 60 microphones. They recorded a live They recorded a live concert. Now they've got these arrays where there's basically one microphone in the middle, and then one microphone pointing up and another microphone pointing down. So they have these arrays of 3 microphones, and then they have a bunch of them, so that they end up with 60 microphones total. But there were, of course, the idea of this is they're recording all the reflections of the sound, not just the direct sound coming from one direction. Then they played it back through a 9.1 speaker setup, which, my gosh, that looked like an Oro 3D speaker arrangement. So traditional 5.1, and then 2 heights, 2 rear heights. So that's what it really looked like. Now, the guy who wrote about it, he heard that and he said, oh, it's very convincing. You know, I was in this smaller mixing room and it really did sound like I was in the large venue listening to the live concert and all that. Okay, everybody makes those claims with every sort of immersive format that they hear.
Of course. Because I'm sure it sounds neato when you first hear it, and it does sound like things are coming from new places.
Yeah. But anyway, I mean, the upshot of it is Sennheiser 3D, they're not really looking to be like a new format per se. In fact, he mentions in the article they're in talks with both Dolby and Oro 3D. So the idea is that they sort of use their codec and their speaker layout, but it would be a recording process, Sennheiser 3D. So it's more on the production end than it is on the playback end. So I don't think we're going to have to worry about upgrading our AV receivers to support Sennheiser 3D.
So are they recording every one of these 60 mics on a separate channel and then playing with it afterwards? Is that what's happening?
It seems to be like it's all going into like a 60-track recorder, and then they're using their processing to mux it all down to 9.1 speakers. Right?
Wow. Well, I'm just thinking, as someone who has mixed live music before with a 16-channel mixer, I feel for the guys that have to tweak that out and set the levels ahead of time. You know?
It must be algorithm-based, because there's no way someone is doing that manually by hand.
No, there's no human, because you only have so many fingers. I don't know how that works.
It seems a bit extreme, but apparently the results are great. So, all right, maybe we'll see some Sennheiser 3D mixed live performances in Oro 3D or something like that, because that seems to be the speaker layout that they went with.
Well, one would hope that unless Sennheiser is trying to make their own version of Atmos, that they're trying to make something that will go into an Atmos disc.
Yeah.
And be played back through that
Not
system.
a new codec. Please, not a new codec.
No, God, no.
We have enough.
Yes.
Clint.
Clint M
is a new listener, and he wanted to thank us for the exceptional job we do answering people's questions. Those are his words. We're not tooting our own horn. His home theater room is in the middle of a basement, and it's flanked by a laundry room on one side and a storage room on the other. And there are doors to both that, and there's a door at the top of the stairs. So it's, it's an enclosed room. It's like these are wide open things, wide open spaces. But he's heard us talk about pressurizing your theater and being able to feel like, super deep bass that sort of blurs your vision, and that you really need to pressurize the room in order to do that. He wants that. But he's like, these doors, yes, I have doors, but they're not like airtight sealed doors. They're just regular doors. And then he's got, AC vents. He's got, duct work, air return, all that type of stuff. So he goes, is this going to work? Like,
yes.
Am I going to be able to pressurize the room, or does all of this, mean that I have to weather strip around everything and replace everything and seal up everything?
No, you don't have to put your theater in a thermos.
Right.
It doesn't have to be perfectly sealed to every molecule of air. No, not at all.
Yeah, the way to think of this is, the easiest way to envision it is to think water. If you filled up your room with water, having the door wide open means a lot more water leaks out than just having a little at the bottom of your door. Now, does that mean that some water leaks out? Yes, it does, but less. This is not binary. It's not all or nothing.
But fortunately, all the other rooms in your house are full of water in that analogy. And so it doesn't all just pour out, instantaneously into a vacuum.
It will move a little bit, but not as much as if those were permanent openings with no door whatsoever. So you can impede the movement of air. You're not completely stopping it. You have not hermetically sealed your room. It would be easier to pressurize your room with deep subwoofer if your room were hermetically sealed. If it was water and airtight, it would be even easier. But you can impede the movement of air by closing the door.
At some point, air has to flow in from your AC system and flow out of the room for it to work. So you can never perfectly seal it up unless you plan on not breathing through the whole movie.
Yeah, that's right. And, you can do what they call a dead vent, which is basically only letting the air move in one direction by installing, large fans somewhere in the system. So you're moving the air in from one direction and then moving it out on the other, and it only moves in that one direction. So that helps. But yeah, you don't have to worry. Now, if what you're worried about is soundproofing, that's a different thing. Because again, closing any door does reduce the amount of sound that you hear in the adjacent room. But of course, that doesn't make it silent. Whereas if you completely sealed the room, that's closer. That's going to get closer to soundproofing. So if what you're worried about there, then yes, weather stripping, putting putty around your electrical outlets, installing a dead vent or flexible ducting instead of hard, rigid ducting. All of those things do help. But as far as just actually being able to pressurize the room with subwoofers, if you can close those doors, you're way better than the people who have permanent openings. So
Right. Yeah. Don't overthink that. You're fine. It sounds like you've got a place you can. Yeah. You're going to be more worried about placement of subs and absorption and that sort of thing.
All right. How much time do we need for your Lee?
I don't know. I don't know how much talking it needs. Well, I don't know.
I'm going to see if we can get a little bit further. We got ourselves a big queue here. So let's see. Let's press on. Corey B got in touch on Twitter. He says he's done some research that indicates that just the regular pink insulation, the pink stuff, is just as good for deadening sound inside of walls and ceilings as the more expensive like Roxol Safe and Sound or things that are marketed as soundproof or sound deadening insulation. He's like, as far as I can tell, the pink stuff's just as good. So, yeah. Are you familiar with this at all?
I am not familiar with that Roxol product, but my guess is, I think it's funny. He says he's done research, and then he says, is this true? I don't know. You're the one that did the research. But my guess would be it's awful close. And when you're buying things like Roxol, you're trying to get that last little degree of better and best. You're trying to go from better to best.
Yeah, actually, over at Sound Acoustics, Dave Fabricant, there, the founder, he did a lot of this testing independently himself too, and he's like, yeah, the pink stuff is just fine. If you want to, damp the inside of your speaker, like they put Macron batting in there or whatever, he's like, it all turns moving sound energy into heat. It all does it just fine. The Roxol Safe and Sound has a higher fire rating than the pink stuff. So, that's the safe part of the Safe and Sound name. Is it does actually have a longer burn time. So that's not nothing. If what you're looking for is a higher fire safety rating, all right, maybe it's worth the cost. But as far as the sound goes, yeah, you're absolutely right. The regular pink stuff, the yellow stuff, the white stuff, the Roxol Safe and Sound, it all about the same. As far as the actual sound deadening goes. Now, I will say if you're trying to make absorption panels that you're going to hang on your wall out of it, then something that's got a little bit more rigidity to it is just nice from a physical standpoint, right?
Yeah, like for actually mounting it and yeah, of course.
Yeah, so
I always think back to some of the best sound absorption I ever did was a cheap Walmart bedspread behind my head in a room we were using as a studio back when I did radio. It was just basically blankets, and they sounded better than the stuff that was actually in the actual radio station studio because it was really thin and almost brittle feeling, and it was absorption panels they had in the studio, but my bedspread sounded better.
Yeah, it was probably thicker and probably had more fibers to turn more movement of air into heat because that's all you're doing.
It was ugly as sin, though. It was so ugly.
Inside the walls, don't worry about it. You're fine with the pink stuff if it's cheaper. I like Ryan's questions, so let's hit. He's actually written in before about setting up his new living room, and he was going to do it as only 3.1 because he's got nowhere to put surround speakers.
All right.
His wife's like, you can't use the back wall, you can't put them on stands, you can't hang them down from the ceiling. He's like, all right, I guess I don't have surround speaker. Well, he misses them. He's listening to things in his 3.1 and he misses them. So
I
he's
would
like,
too.
Pretty much my only option here is in ceiling speakers.
Yeah.
So basically he is actually going to install like a dedicated theater in his basement, but this is what he's using for now. They've just moved in here. So he's like, I don't want to spend a bunch, at the most, maybe $200. His current setup is a Denon X2100 for the receiver, and he's got some Bic Acoustic towers and center for his front three. He's got a couple of do-it-yourself Dayton Ultimax 15 subs, so he managed to finagle those into the room. That's not a bad trade-off, man. I'd take 3.2 with 2 subs over surround channels any day.
Yeah, I don't know though, man. Surround channels. I'd rather have surround channels than the second sub, but I know that's blasphemy around here.
It sure is.
But there's a whole reason it's called surround sound.
Well, he agrees with you. He's missing them, so he wants to basically know. when in ceilings are his only option, he did send a diagram of his room, so we know what we're dealing with this in. He has some space behind his couch, and then over to his left is his kitchen, so it's sort of open there. Like there's the counter coming halfway.
There's a counter,
but
with the stove in it, and
pretty much open on his left side, and then the door that enters the house is on his right. So he goes, is it even worth putting speakers in the ceiling? Because is it going to sound really weird? He was used to having surrounds and surround backs on stands before. If so, should he go for just 2 or should he go for 4? Where exactly should he put them? That's all the questions he's got going around.
Yeah, according to his diagram, it looks like he could put surrounds and surround backs. He could buy 4 in-ceiling speakers. He could, and it would be better than not having them.
So, yeah, I mean, he's only got maybe 3 feet behind him.
3 feet, not enough for your surround backs.
Yeah, even if you had traditional surround backs, I'd really question putting surround backs in, because you kind of want at least about 4 feet behind you if you're going to do surround backs at all.
Okay. Well, then just do the surrounds.
Yeah, well, hey, the price is lower, so you can't argue with that.
That's true.
The other thing is, when you're talking about using in-ceilings for your surrounds as opposed to regular speakers on stands or mounted on the wall, the idea is you're not going to get the perfect directional cues anymore. Like you kind of got to give up on that. When the sound was supposed to be coming from directly beside you, like a discrete sound effect, like a bullet whizzing right there, it's just plain not going to come from the right direction. Now the speaker's in the ceiling, but the majority of the time, all you're dealing with is ambience and enveloping sounds, and those can totally work fine coming from an in-ceiling speaker. I would advise going for a position that would give you a more diffuse, less pinpoint directional type sound. So to do that, what I would do is I'd get them, of course, over to the sides, right? To the left and right of the couch, but I'd move them back a bit. I mean, and that's totally normal. Like within the Dolby guidelines, you have anywhere from a 90 to at least a 110-degree angle. Some say a 120-degree angle to the left to the right, and I would take advantage of that. I'd move them a little bit behind the seat and over to the sides, and that way you don't have any speakers like firing directly down at you. Any of the sound you're going to be hearing is going to be more diffuse.
Right. So you don't want to be in that right-hand couch seat with a speaker directly over your head.
Exactly. Yeah, because that's going to be potentially distracting.
So keep them out wide. Put them maybe like in over where the door is.
Yeah, exactly. Like right in front of the door and sort of right in front of his stove.
Yeah,
in the diagram, and I wrote to him an email. He's like, yeah, he could do that. So I think that's the way to go. As for what to buy, because he was like, what should I get for this price range? I'm like, well, Bic has matching in-ceiling speakers for the exact line of speakers that he has. They're $60 a piece from Amazon.
That sounds perfect.
That fits.
Yeah, may as well match. I was going to say this is one of those times where you could go out and buy car stereo speakers. But he doesn't need to if they've got nice speakers that sort of already match sound wise.
$120 a pair. That leaves him enough money to get the speaker wire, because he says there's an attic above, so it's not access isn't a problem.
Oh, so, this is great. Yeah, that'd be great.
I think you're good to go. Yeah. And it'll fill in its sides. You might not get the pinpoint directionality you want, but it'll be better than no surrounds at all.
It's better than nothing back there. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I've gone for a long time. I had surround speakers sitting on the floor aiming up for ages, and it was kind of all right.
Not ideal, but it's good. It's something. You know what? I'm going to aim to get up to Josh. That is my goal. And then we will hit your questions, Lee. That's right. Kevin L. He added a second subwoofer, a SVS SB12 NSD. He bought that on impulse from SVS's moving sale. So he got that email. He's like, ooh, hey, that's cheap and nice. I'll grab one of those. He already has a PB 2000. So that is the ported box 2000, a whole class up, because the the SB12 NSD became the SB 2000, but it got some upgrades when that happened. So anyway, sealed box for one, ported box for the other. So he's asking, is the SB12 NSD just too small, too wimpy a sub to keep up with his PB2000? Right now he has his PB2000, the volume dial only up about halfway, and that's actually like goosed. It's actually more than it needs to be linear. So he's like, it's not like I'm using the entire output capability of the PB2000, not even close to it. Would the SB12 be able to keep up? Is there any hope?
Yeah, you guys have talked about mismatched subs,
right,
on many occasions, and the specifics of what happens. One's not going to ruin the other, mean, unless it's just
Yeah,
an
I mean,
awful cheap
you can.
sub.
Yeah, you can end up with a weakest link scenario where if you are reaching the output limits of one subwoofer but not the other, that's a problem because now you've just created a ton of distortion and compression in the one sub. If one sub can't play as low as the other, then you're not getting the benefits of two subs anymore. Below the point where one subwoofer just rolls off because it just can't play any lower, you're basically down to one sub now. So that's not a great match if they're that mismatched. But the SB-NSD is, like I say, it's very close to the SB2000. The SB2000 uses the same amp and the same driver as the BB2000, but one's ported and one's sealed. Now, if you were in a room large enough that you reached the output limits of that SB12 NSD, then, all right, you're kind of hitting a problem, but it doesn't sound like that's going to be the case here. No. It's not like you're turning up that PB2000, even halfway. So I'd say this is perfectly fine to try. I mean, if you really notice something objectionable, then okay, that's the case. And hey, SVS has their return policy. But this would be fine to try, in my opinion.
Looking at the size of his room and the little diagram he drew.
That's right.
Yeah, you're going to be all right with those subs. They're not going to, one's not going to so outshine the other that it can't happen. And by the way, I love his little diagram included his dog.
That's right. That's where the dog goes.
I just like that.
So he's got an interesting question because right now he's got his PE2000 front and center. Yeah. So like we talked about, if you've only got one sub, that's a great place to put it. Middle of the room, right up at the front. Sure. He's like, he can't put the second subwoofer right in the middle of the back wall because that's a walkway. It'd be a tripping hazard. So he can't put it there. He's like, what he could do is he could actually cut a hole in the back wall and recess the sub into the middle of the back wall. That's one option. He says he's fine with building a really sturdy shelf to actually put the second subwoofer in the middle of the back wall, but up by the ceiling.
Above people's heads.
We've talked about elevating a sub. He's like, he's not worried about the safety. He knows he could do this. That's one option. Or he's got a couple of other places that he could move the subs in the room, but none of them are actually corners. He's got stuff in all the corners of the room, or one of them is also a walkway, or there's doors or windows in the way, or whatever it is. So he's like, it's not really in corners, but you can kind of move them to other places. What do you think, Lee? What
this is what happens in the real world.
It sure is.
Very few of us have that perfect home theater setup and we can put things symmetrically. My first thought was how much of a walkway is behind the couch? Could people get around it and you're just worried about they won't see it in the dark and hit it? And if so, could you get a thin table and put over the sub so people can see the table and not hit the sub?
Well, that's how put some orange cones. Just put some orange cones around it.
On either side
it's a hazard.
I've also heard you guys talk about recessing subs and how that may or may not affect the sound. That doesn't sound like a terrible idea.
That wouldn't be a problem here. I mean, if he's using the sealed one, you could absolutely recess that into the wall. That's not really going to sound at all. And even if you use the ported one back there, that one is front ported. So it's not like you're firing the port into some cavity.
I like that idea. Okay. I like that idea a lot.
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of worried, like, what if these positions don't work out? Like, what if these aren't the optimal positions in the room? Now I've, dedicated money and time and effort to hollowing out a hole in the wall.
Well, testing it back there in the tripping hazard spot would get you close enough to what it's going to sound like when it moves back another foot and a half.
Yeah. Excellent call, Lee. Yes.
Stick it back there, see what it sounds like. If you like it, then cut the hole.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, I mean, honestly, the up high position, it would work.
It would work.
It would totally work. So if you're okay with doing
that shelf from vibrating,
there's that. Yeah.
I'm worried about how sturdy a shelf can you build that it won't become a sound source itself.
Yeah. I kind of think that if you can do the in wall, that's a little bit.
Yeah, I'd go with it in the wall. If you can do that, that sounds great.
Yeah, but I totally agree with you, Lee. Try it out. I mean, obviously, if you do it by yourself, you're not worried about someone tripping over it back there. It's temporary. Right. You're just seeing if that placement works really well. If it does, go ahead and put it in the wall. The other thing is, he's got a position that's kind of close to the front left corner, and then a position on the right wall that's, only a little bit forward of the back wall. It's almost diagonally opposite positions. They would work okay there. It wouldn't be absolutely optimal, the best it could possibly be. No, but it would be pretty darn good. again, you can try this, right? You can do some trial and error with that.
I bet you're going to like it back behind you, recessed into the wall, because that also gets it closer to the couch, and you might feel a little more of that bump in the chest kind of thing.
Yeah. I completely agree with you, Lee. I really like that advice. Josh, we're gonna do it, and then we're gonna get to your questions, Lee.
Okay.
Josh got in touch on Twitter. He sent a link to a video that was posted by Vox.com. They had people compare cheap wines to expensive wines. And they either couldn't tell them apart, or in many cases they actually preferred the cheaper wine when they didn't know which was which. But there was the cool thing at the very end of the video, which is that when they, first of all, the thing we all could predict, which is when they knew which was the expensive wine, then magically they suddenly preferred it.
That's right.
But they actually mentioned how, there have been tests done with actual brain scans, like fMRI machines, watching the brain activity. And when people know that one wine is more expensive than another, their brain waves are actually different. Like, not...
Wait. I want to go to the wine tasting party inside an MRI machine.
That's right.
I want to go to that party. When did that happen? So, did they have a straw? Because that would affect the flavor too. You got to lay down in those things.
But it's this whole thing of, when obviously Josh is saying, this seems to apply to things like crazy expensive cables.
It sure does. Yes, it does.
It's like when and you have this expectation bias of, I am listening to you, I am tasting the more expensive thing.
Yes.
It's when people say they hear or they taste a difference, they are not necessarily lying. Like, their brain activity is actually different when they know the price.
Right.
So that's not a lie.
Right? And reality is created by your brain in your brain. And if your brain gets input that adds to the flavor, like this is expensive, you get excited. Yeah. I've talked about that a lot. My wife and I go to a wine tasting almost every week. There's some folks that have a little wine shop in town, and it's a very sort of low-key, cool thing. And we all joke about this all the time, that I keep encouraging them to have a blind wine tasting. Like, cover the labels, cover the bottles, and pour it, and let me just, can I guess anything about it? Can I guess the price? And then blow my mind. That would be so much fun.
I really liked where they said, they had like professional reviewers, where, they gave them like 10 wines to taste, but unbeknownst to them, 3 of them were the same. Like 3 of the glasses were the same.
The same wine.
The other 7 were different, and yet they gave different scores to the same glass of wine on the 3 separate occasions.
Because you're drinking it either before or after another wine, or after itself, that does change your perception of flavor. And that kind of thing happens in audio too. I'll tell you, just like in the audio world, I've noticed, if you just go out to Walmart and buy a $5 bottle of wine, it does not taste good. I'm sorry, it does not. But there is a point of diminishing returns. And for me, depending on the wine, that's anywhere from $15 to $35. I've bought a $50 bottle before, and that was like, wow, crazy for me to spend that much. Yeah. And somewhere in that $15 to $35 range, you can find any flavor and deliciousness you want. But there are $500 bottles of wine. Why do they exist? I don't know. And it's the same thing with audio. There's that point where I've noticed, for me, you start getting above about $1,000 a pair for speakers, I start going, meh. I'm like, that's nice, but so are those.
I agree. But yeah, I like that little thing about the actual brain scans at the end. So we'll have the link to the video there on the website. All right, Lee, it is your turn. You are up. Do you want to start with your Facebook thing? Because
I can mention the Facebook thing quickly. It was just really interesting. An article in The Atlantic about there's a $19 billion industry that is renting cable boxes to people like you and me. And someone is now proposing that cable access would be an app on any connected device. So you would set a standard for the software that then allowed all kinds of manufacturers to make devices and sell to us, so that we could call the cable company and go, I have a new device. Like, I can go buy a cable modem, and I can call the cable company and go, my Motorola is hooked up. Here's the MAC address. And that sort of thing needs to happen with rental boxes, because it is ridiculous, because no one's advancing that technology. I'm so sick of cable boxes being the size of receivers, and so sick of having to pay to rent them. It's just like in the old days, and this article talks about it, when phones were all rentals.
I know.
Like, if it was 1965, no one owned a phone.
Yeah.
And
you rented it from the phone company.
Despite it being such a simple device. So there is legal precedent for that needing to happen. So I'm rooting the FCC on. If the FCC makes these changes and they set a standard, I'll be so excited.
Yeah, well, it was so strange because they talk about this all the time over on Entertainment 2.0 because, they're worried about like Windows Media Center or using your home theater PC to record cable programs. And of course, the only way you can do that is with a cable card.
Cable card.
And
the cable companies hate those because you can't do pay-per-view.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, cable card was kind of the first stab at this because, we largely have to thank TiVo for that because TiVo was like, hey, we're not necessarily affiliated with your cable company, but we want you to be able to buy a TiVo box separately and then have some way of accessing cable content through it. And so, I mean, the original FCC rules were that not only did cable card have to be supported by all the cable providers in the States, because, I mean, we never had it like up here in Canada. Up here, I got to use whatever the cable company offers, right? I can't go buy a third-party option. But in the States, they had this cable card, and then they even mandated that the cable company's own cable box had to use cable card. Like, that was just to make sure that they supported cable card. That's the way they came at it. So they've changed that rule now. They're like, hey, cable companies, your boxes no longer actually have to physically use a cable card inside of them.
But technically, Comcast and all those others have to offer cable cards still to this day. If you call them and say, I need a cable card, they have to bring you one. They'll act like they'll warn you when you call and ask for a cable card. They'll be like, now, you understand there's a lot of compatibility problems, and this might not work right, and you won't be able to get that.
Because they want their stupid rental fee for their box every month.
Well, the other thing you don't get that is a legit interesting thing is the on-demand.
That's right. Yeah.
So I do like on-demand now. And so if we can get a software standard that allows us to do pay-per-view, if you're dumb enough to do pay-per-view, I just refuse to do pay-per-view. To me, that's like a toll road. I will drive 50 more miles before I get on a toll road.
Well, I'll tell you the other reason why I'm really hoping it becomes a software solution is because Windows Media Center is dead.
Yes.
There's no Windows Media Center in Windows 10 whatsoever. Obviously, we'll be going forward with this. If it becomes a software solution, then there is entirely the possibility that home theater PCs will once again have a means of acting as DVRs and recording cable content. Because, as long as they have the right, as far as I'm concerned, to essentially restrict your access to their content because, unless you're a paid subscriber, you're not supposed to be access it. You're not supposed to be able to record it unless you've, licensed the right to do that. So, okay, there needs to be some sort of digital rights management. That's what cable card was there to do. It was
But somehow we got along for decades with being able to record anything that came over the cable line in the low def days. And I loved being able to record programs and keep them. And I can't do that anymore in any practical, simple way. I can.
Got to stay on Windows 7 with a cable card.
There's ways around
Windows
it.
8.
There's ways around it.
That's right, yeah.
You can get other doohickeys, but it's a pain in the butt. And they want to keep it a pain in the butt.
If this can go software, then yes, please let's do that, and let's let something else replace Windows Media Center as the only DVR solution on an HTPC.
Now, on a different note.
Yes.
My problem. Help me with my problem, Rob.
I will try, Lee. I will try.
I'm getting ever more angry at my amplifier that I bought 1 year ago.
Yeah.
Now, you remember I've talked before, I used to have, and I still have in this office with me, an old Yamaha receiver from about the year 2000. And it had Dolby Digital 5.1. It was, kicking for its time. It's got optical inputs.
Sure.
So it's one of those. It's about at that level, and it's got all standard def input, no high def input.
Yeah.
So that's what you get back then. And it had the magic bass extension button. You remember me talking about that? That just boosted all the sub frequency. Yeah, it was just a good old, and it was a wonderful bass, but it worked great with the speakers I have. But I decided, okay, I have a Chromecast now. It's time to enter the modern age. I want HDMI switching. I was tired of using a separate HDMI switcher.
Okay. Because
my TV's older, it has one HDMI input.
Okay.
Right. The TV only has one because the TV was old as well. Because that's the problem, being an early adopter of some things and then keeping those things forever because they're still working. It gets really frustrating because you don't have the features. Anyway, so I bought the new receiver, which did not have the bass extension button. So I hated it for that because now my bass feels all thin, even though it's probably somewhat more accurate. It doesn't have the chocolatey deep goodness that I was excited about. But now it's done another thing. Now, 3 times over the past couple of weeks, it has shut down on me because I was listening too loud.
Okay. Now,
so what is happening there?
I have to ask you the silly tech support question, because Tom just talked about this a couple weeks ago because his Denon was doing it.
Yes.
Have you double and triple checked all of your speaker wire connections?
Dude, I have not this week looked at the speaker connections. Let me tell you, I double and triple checked them when I hooked this thing up last year.
Okay.
I did do it then, and because I remember back then, I don't want to be that guy. So after a year, you're telling me that somehow something could be slipped loose. I'll go check.
We're dealing with heat, and we're dealing with potentially one strand of a speaker wire.
Dude, you're talking to an OCD master of cutting things just the right length and getting it in there just right. I swear to God, I would bet, if not quite my life, I would bet a couple of limbs. I'll give you an arm and a leg if there's a piece hanging off there.
I'm not saying that's the cause, but I
understand.
I understand. To check. Yeah, because the thing was, it's not like your receiver did this from day one, right?
So that's true. Well, to tell you the truth now, one thing I did notice and one thing I wanted to mention is that because my chocolatey deep bass kind of went away, I've noticed I watch less movies. And that's sad. But it's true because I'm not getting the oomph I'm used to. And now, yes, I know I don't have a subwoofer. I get a subwoofer, but I don't have any money right now. I'm working on that, starting a new career. It's coming. Maybe I'll do that. But even if I did, there's problems there. But, anyway, so I've got speakers that I know can make bass loud enough to make me happy. Whether or not it's perfect, they used to make me happy and now they don't. And so, I've got the bass turned up. Like on this amplifier, it's got YPOW, and I did that. And YPOW decided it needed to boost at like 60 hertz a lot.
Okay.
Maybe not the crossover frequency for the big 15-inch woofer in my tower speakers. So it's those side-firing woofers, it's tall, skinny, and it's deep.
But deep, All
right, so 15-inch woofers aiming off to the sides. And, they were able to make a lot of bass. So YPOW did a boost at 60 hertz. And I'm like, still it sounds kind of thin. But the only other thing you can adjust on that amplifier is a simple bass and treble control.
Yeah.
And I'm not even sure if it's decibel, but I just went to a +6 on the bass and went, that's a little better. So that's how my poor system is running. And it's sending all of the sub bass to the front mains. Because they've got the giant woofers.
Oh, yeah. So you have, in your case, set them to large because you do not have separate subwoofers. Yeah,
right, and that's the only thing set to large. Everything else is set to small, the centers and the two surrounds. And it only shut down now, these 3 occasions where I was watching Interstellar. And you know how that
there's a lot of bass in that one, for sure.
Synth organ kind of music. It's very intense. It's sustained, rumbly. And right in the middle of that, pow, it just shut right off. And I didn't know what happened. And it comes back on.
Did you happen to put a hand over it and see if it was toasty hot?
I did not. It should have sufficient ventilation back there.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying, but it would be an indicate. Like the thing is, if it isn't, if it isn't a short that's happening, and remember, the short could be happening at either the receiver end or at the speaker binding post end, or somewhere in between in the speaker wire.
Okay, all right.
Who knows? Maybe a doggy chewed on something.
No, not this dog. Too old to do it.
No there. But if it isn't that, and it actually is just the receiver trying to supply more current than it can and going into protection mode, then it ought to be quite toasty warm at the point that happens.
Okay. All right.
It would be an indication, right? Because it's just trying to send a pile of current through. If that's what's causing it, it's odd. Okay, it's very odd because it's not like you're in a gigantic room.
No.
Even
and I had it like this receiver, does the count up the minus decibels up to 0 reference level, and I was at something like a -4.
Yep.
So I wasn't. It'll let you go plus a little bit too.
Oh yeah.
So I had it at -4, which it ought to survive.
Yes.
And I even there's even a setting in there where you say set it to 6 ohm speakers, and my speakers are, and they're Yamaha speakers on a Yamaha amp. And they used to be hooked up to a different Yamaha amp. And so like, okay, guys, you should know these are, so they have a setting for it. I even set that to 6 ohms to say, this is what you're going to be feeding.
Okay. Does it have a setting for 8?
It does.
Try that.
Put it on 8.
Put it on 8, because when you set it to the lower impedance, it just chokes power off. That's all it does. Okay. It just chokes power off. It's there technically for safety reasons. It's not really even safety reasons. It's to meet a specification of how much power is allowed through, but it is capable of allowing more power through if you set it to the highest impedance setting.
Okay, so set it to 8 ohms instead and try again. Then maybe see if it's hot, and then see if my wires are in there right.
Check your speaker wires first, Lee. Check your speaker wires before.
Man. Do you realize if I look back there and a speaker wire is loose...
Don't even look. Just disconnect all binding posts and redo them.
Dude, if that fixes it, you'll probably never hear from me again. I will just die. I will fall over and die because I am so certain.
Everybody say goodbye to Lee. Everybody wish him well.
Everything back there is going to be perfect. There's no way I could make a mistake on that. Okay, I'll check. No, you're right. You're right. That's the very first thing I ought to check.
One variable at a time here. One variable at a time. So but set the impedance to 8 anyway, because it should be there anyway. There's no reason to set it to 6 or 4.
Guardians of the Galaxy was the other movie I was watching with a friend who was visiting from out of town, and there were 2 occasions in that movie, and we had to bring it down to about -10, and it survived from then on. So it's really only doing it when it's at the highest volume level.
Yeah. Okay.
So I don't know if it's overheating, or it's because it's set to 6 ohms.
Or just protection mode,
or because I don't know how to wire something, even though I do.
It's not that. It's that over time, things do move just because there is
heat. 1 year,
There is definitely a lot of heat actually sometimes going through the speaker wires. They heat up because there's power flowing through them, and things expand and contract, and that's all it is.
It really made me... I almost pulled that amp out and swapped out for the old one.
Yeah.
Because the old one, I actually liked it better. And I know it's frustrating because it sounds ridiculous. I don't have a sub, and clearly I was boosting bass. It was probably more than was really accurate, but it sounded correct. And I never once, when I was using the old amp from the year 2000, I never once thought this thing sounds like it's straining. In fact, a friend of mine has exactly the same amp, and we've often laughed, like, what is the second half of the volume knob for? It's so powerful. I've never turned it above half.
It's almost a shame that you didn't wait till now for the latest models, because I was just looking through the features, because I thought I spotted this, but I'm looking through the features of the latest Yamaha Avantage amps, like the X850 and going up from there. Okay. They have that extra bass setting back, Lee. They've got it there now. They have extra bass on and off.
Is it called bass extension? Is it
they're just calling it extra bass now.
I'm going to tell you what that is. I can tell you what that is because my amp has something like that. Extra bass, according to Yamaha, if it's called extra bass, I'm pretty sure, is because they have a setting where you can have a sub where all the sub frequencies are going to the sub, but they're also going to the mains.
Okay.
That's I think in Yamaha speak, that's what. Yeah.
Double bass. Okay.
So I think I have that, and that doesn't help me.
Well,
I miss my bass boost, and I don't have any way to get it unless I went in there. There's a way you can manually tweak the YPOW settings, and I could put a wide curve low bass boost, I suppose, but I could just manually change it from what they decided. I mean, I'm tempted to try that.
Yeah, you could you could try turning YPOW off and just manually adjusting the EQ to whatever you want.
Yeah, I don't know. I couldn't see a way to do. There didn't appear to be a way to like just mess with the EQ as if it was a good old fashioned EQ. It looked like it was only.
Okay.
Set it with YPOW. I didn't see. I'll go look again. I'll look again. I just got so mad when the thing didn't sound like I wanted, and I've actually watched less movies. It's very sad.
If we never hear from Lee again, we will know.
You'll know.
The speaker wire fixed it.
You're like, whatever happened to that Lee character? His speaker wires were loose, and he shot himself.
Oh no! Don't do that,Lee.
I'm sorry. I joked too dramatically. I shouldn't make jokes like that.
Really not worth that. Was there anything else?
I will be embarrassed.
I thought you mentioned one last thing to wrap us up, or was that it?
That is all I have at this time. There's probably something I meant to talk about.
Well, I think you were maybe going to talk about the whole 15-inch drivers and the two things versus subwoofers, but we did address that actually right at the beginning of the show.
Let's maybe the next time I'm with you, I will see what happened as a result of my checking the dadgum wires. And dadgum's a good Southern word. I'll check the wires. I'll check for heat, and I'll change it to 8 ohms, and I'll literally watch Interstellar again, which I don't mind because it was great. Yeah. And we'll see what happens at -4 dB on Interstellar. And if it shuts off again, then I'll come back to you and go, okay, it was hot or it wasn't hot, and we'll see what happens there. But the next time I talk to you, I'd like to discuss, is there anything I can do before I can afford subwoofers? And how can I help my brain accept the need for 10 or 12-inch subwoofers when I have big 15-inch woofers in my speakers that used to make me happy?
Well, I can let you know the only thing you can do when you do not have separate subwoofers and you want to try and improve the bass responses in your room is you have to very carefully play with the placement of your speakers,
Yes.
and potentially the placement of your seat. That is all you can.
I can't really change much about that. I've got them kind of towed in a little. They're sitting away from the walls a little bit where they sound pretty darn good, or they used to.
Because you do have to position them for where they image best, because the high frequencies are obviously still important.
Right. And I guess before we get off the topic, I asked you this one time a long time ago, and I never tried it, but do you think bi-amping would help if I put another 100 watt per channel just to the woofers?
If the problem is that you are actually genuinely just running out of power, it might. Bi-amping actually might, because when you're bi-amping like within an AV receiver, obviously it's not like the power supply got bigger, but what you have done is double the number of output transistors through which power can flow.
Right.
So if the problem is that not enough power is able to flow through one given channel, this is like if you're thinking about the water analogy, you've just opened up another pipe. Right? So the actual amount of water behind those pipes, that hasn't changed, but you've opened up two pipes for the water to flow through. So if the choke point was just the one pipe, the one channel, then that could actually make a difference.
If nothing else seems wrong, is that worth my effort trying?
Yes.
Because my speakers can do that. They have a binding post thing that you can remove the little bar. And
I actually think if it isn't a speaker wire,
it might be. Maybe I'm crazy.
If it isn't that. I actually think the 6 ohm setting is more likely the cause of this problem because it is choking off power.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll see what happens, and maybe I'll get happier about watching movies. Thank you for that.
You betcha. Well, that was fun. We did it.
It was very fun. We got through a lot of stuff.
We sure did. Yeah, we put a dent in it. So I will mention, let's see, we got up to Josh, right?
That sounds right. Yeah.
Fred on Facebook, we got your comment. We just talked. Got quite a series of questions here, so we've got those in the queue. Jason E, he sent quite a detailed email. I'm hoping I will hear back from him. I just emailed him today. I didn't realize the pictures he sent didn't come through clearly. I wasn't able to open them and view all his pictures. So I'm really hoping he'll get back to us with the pictures, because I'm sure he included them the first time. He wants us to see them. Jason, if you're able to. Nick B, we've got questions there. Justin, still not Bieber on Facebook.
What a great nickname.
Some more questions. James has some updates for us and sort of a hypothetical question too. So we'll get hopefully. My goodness, we still have quite a bit left over, but you're all in the queue. If you did not hear your name just mentioned and you did not literally just send your question like an hour ago from when we were recording this, then please send it again. We are absolutely not ignoring anybody's question.
No,
if we don't mention you, it's because somehow it got lost on the shuffle. So once again, you can reach us, rob@avrant.com, tom@avrant.com, question@avrant.com if you want to make sure it gets into the list. Hit question@avrant.com. You can reach us on Twitter. I am @FirstReflect. Tom is @avrant_Tom. Our producer, Austin, is @AustinPond. Lee, where do they get you?
And just for fun, if you want to talk to me, I'm Lee Overtweet.
Lee Overtweet. There it is. Hit us up on Facebook, facebook.com/AVRantPodcast. And of course, come to the website, avrant.com. That's where you see all the links, all the videos that we talked about on the show. And if you'd like to support the podcast, you can do so there with the support the podcast, buy us a cup of coffee button, which is a PayPal donation. So once again, we will thank our listeners of the week. We had Jason, Chris, and Daniel all kindly sent us donations. Chris helped out another listener from last week. It's awesome that our community is doing that. Daniel also let SVS know that he bought products from them because of us. Scott did the same thing with SVS, and Coffee Man Dave on Twitter. Dave,
I might have to follow Coffee Man Dave, and we'll talk about grinding coffee beans and dosing and timings and pressures and temperatures. I bet he'd be into that.
So thank you once again to everyone. Thanks to all our listeners, all the questions, all the feedback. Wishing Tom a speedy recovery.
Yes.
I hope we did him proud and kept the show going in his stead. It's all we can do. All we can do to
I think I can. I know how Tom is. I bet you his answer would be, I don't care.
Yeah, I didn't listen to this episode. There's no way Tom is ever hearing this episode anyway. So
no, he doesn't care.
Right.
He's just trying to survive right now. He doesn't care what we're talking about.
Alrighty. Well, thank you so much, folks. Lee, I'll let you have the final word. I will say that for Tom and for myself, this has been AV Rant. Lee,
Now go listen to something.
There you go. All right. All set. I will be turning off our live recording. I pray to God it went to the correct YouTube account this time so I don't have to re-upload it like I did last time. I'm hoping the audio was all right because last time it was atrocious and I had to redo that too.
So here we go. Before anything happens, I'm immediately saving this file.
That's a good idea.
0907.
And for our final few viewers who are still hanging on here, I will attempt to set up a Hangout party. I might not stick around for long, but I will attempt to set that up. I will put the link on Facebook and on Twitter. That's where the link is going to show up. So head to our Facebook page, and I will be posting the link for our Hangout party momentarily. Thanks very much, everyone. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.